Okay, we're live.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome on this auspicious occasion to our first meeting in the revised council chambers. In how long has it been, CAO, since we were in this room in a face-to-face meeting?
Early March 2020.
March of 2020. Well, we do have some people here with us in council chambers tonight. And we also have more of you watching from home on YouTube. And we appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to join us. When this meeting is over, both the people who will be observing here in chamber and those of you who are at home will have an opportunity to ask a question on any issue that was discussed this evening. We'll begin by acknowledging that we are gathered today in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral, present, and future territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Tonight, we gather with the intent followed by the living peace and friendship treaties, and we do so with respect, cooperation, and coexistence. We'll call the meeting to order. Council, you have an agenda in front of you that was emailed to you originally. Councillor Feeney.
Mayor, I move that we accept the agenda as submitted.
Moved and seconded to accept the agenda as submitted. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Let's go to the minutes of the regular meeting on the 28th of July. What is your wish, Council?
Move that we accept this circulated.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson, all in favor? Motion is carried. The special meeting of August 22nd. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, please move that they be accepted as circulated.
Thank you. Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Motion is carried. The minutes of the meeting of August the 30th.
Move that they be approved as circulated.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Carver. All in favor? The motion is carried. We have two presentations tonight on our agenda. Remind each of the presenters that they have 10 minutes to bring their issue to council, beginning with Derek McGrath. Is it McGrath, Derek?
Yeah, so McGrath, one or the other.
McGrath.
I don't know whether you're Irish or not.
Tomato. Derek, you want to talk about your concerns for traffic on Pleasant Street?
Yes, I have came about 8 or 9 years ago. I brought engineering studies from Sudbury, Ottawa, Halifax, and as far away as the state park in Alaska, trying to get some consideration of the speeding that's going on Pleasant Street. And I must say, I was happy this year to see the speed humps, I think they're called, instead of bumps, on Kinburn Street back by the old fire hall. So I'm hoping that something can be done on Pleasant Street, because the speeding on Pleasant Street has got worse over the years. I would estimate now, whoever decided to put the speed trap or whatever that's on the pole of people going up the hill, I know you can speed going up the hill, but the majority of the problem is the people coming down the hill. There are a number of issues that could be addressed. One of them is to have a stop sign at the top of Faubourg Road for people that turn left. And then also to have a couple of speed humps somewheres, because coming out of our driveway, it's impossible because we have a lovely red maple, which I planted as a child. So you can see it's been there for a while. And I don't want to cut it down to have to increase my sight line, but if need be, it may have to be done, because there are people coming down that hill and they're screeching to a halt. And I've talked to other neighbors, Naomi Jewers, and I've talked to Chris and Kathy Weil, and they also have some concerns, because if you try to back into your driveway, then you go across, going up the hill, you come across two lanes, which makes it even worse if somebody's coming down, because then you're blocking both lanes. And most of the time, people do come up the hill. They don't come down the hill from Faubourg when you're going into the driveways. I would hope that some consideration will be given, since you put 6-speed humps on the road coming back by the old fire hall and the cemetery. There should be room to put a couple or do something on Pleasant Street.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council? Councilor Wilson.
Just a question, Derek. Your letter, as I recall, suggested the speed humps might go on Faubourg Road. So is it one or the other or both?
Whatever you can do to stop it. I guess if you put a stop sign in, then you may not need a speed bump on Faubourg Road. I mean, before, when I brought all the engineering sites and that, there was the concern that it was would affect the snow removal. Well, I went to the city of Ottawa. A personal friend of mine was head of snow removal, and he said that wasn't the case. That was just an obstacle put into place to not address the situation. But now that these humps are lower than bumps, then, maybe there's something that can be done, which won't affect the snowplow area. It's up to you to decide where you want to put it. My only concern is to stop people from speeding come that hill, because I could say this summer there were people who were going 70 and 80 coming down that hill, and hopefully after the speed trap or the sign there that picks up the speeds. I talked to Jonathan Wenzel, who was out there resetting it one day, and he said that they had to leave it up for another couple of weeks, which I assume is over with now. And hopefully now it'll be moved to our side of the road so that we can get some statistic to back up what is happening. Because I could sit here and say, I see people speeding. I have a very good idea when somebody's going over 40 or 50 kilometers an hour, but I can't prove it. In fact, I made an offer, I think a couple of years ago, for Colbert to actually pay for a couple of months to have, because I think you have 2 or 3 of those speed traps or whatever, paying to have it on Pleasant Street, because I wanted to prove what was going on. And there was came back to me that yes, they would consider it. Now I didn't hear anything more, but this summer when I was down, I really decided it's time to try to solve this problem, because it's been going on for 10 or 12, well, maybe even longer. When I was a child, Faubourg Road wasn't the road it is now. It was hardly ever used. Now people use it, to get to Lunenburg and back from Lunenburg. It's a major thoroughfare. And I think 3 summers ago, they were doing some work on the new building in Lunenburg there, and I counted over 70 truckloads of material in a weekend going up and down that hill. Now, since the street has been redone, it can certainly handle the weight of the trucks, but the width of it, I don't think it's meant to have trucks running up and down that street continuously.
Thank you. CAO.
If I may, this is actually perfect timing. For members of council, you will have seen that the staff report to council indicates that we're expecting our next report from the traffic authority at the end of September. And certainly Pleasant Street is one of the locations that he plans to talk about. In addition to where the sign is currently located, as you noted, Mr. McGrath, going up the hill, we have actually had it in the other direction too, going down the hill. And in addition to that, with all the work we've done with Bicycle Nova Scotia, with active transportation, that sort of thing, they've had their own counters there as well. So we have a fair bit of data about what happens on Pleasant Street. So we are expecting a report at the end of the month. As council's aware, our CAO is away tonight, but he plans to bring that to council the next meeting. So the timing of your presentation is fantastic. Thank you very much, Mr. McGrath.
Okay, could I make one other comment? As a person that did 911 across Ontario, I had contracts that went from Huron County in the west to Prescott Russell in the east. I probably made over 100 presentations to different councils. And when I read your how to make presentations in that, it's pretty restrictive, and that most of them allow a 10-minute at the end of a meeting, and you can talk about anything, even what's called the ARAC committee in Ottawa, which is 1 million people, Agricultural Rural Affairs Committee. You can go and talk. With the policy that you have in place, I have the feeling that you're trying to not be open and transparent, and that's a shame. Because once you do that, then people are looking for other areas of why it is that way. And I'm just telling you, where I've been to a lot of council meetings all across Ontario, not in Nova Scotia, except for your one other time, restricting how people can approach you makes people feel uneasy. And I'm not a person that is made feel uneasy very easy.
Yes, please.
So we have a policy and strategy committee meeting coming up at the end of the month. It's the last Monday in the month, and I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I don't have the number in front of me, sorry. And on that agenda, one of the things to be reviewed is the council policy. So if you would be willing, may I send you an email to follow up tomorrow or the next day about just sort of some of the differences, and that was certainly part of the policy that we will be discussing. So if you'd be willing.
I'd love to, because like I say, I went from some meetings that were up in Northumberland where the guys came in, they still had their farmers smocks on and their boots and everything. And I went as far as some of them where everybody was with you people, semi-formal, and then other ones that were very formal, but they all allowed, even the ARAC committee in Ottawa allowed people to come and talk at the end. And it gives people a feeling of being part of what you're doing if they're not restricted of how they can approach you and what they can say when they approach you.
Okay,
Maureen, that's the 26th.
26.
26, yeah. Councillor Carver.
I know we can't make any decisions about this presentation tonight because that's also part of the policy. And I think the policy is so that we are sure to have enough time to reflect on the issues. And we will also have the report at the end of the month that we can follow through on. I have to say that I'm particularly interested, Derek, in the idea of a stop sign at Fobo and Pleasant. Going up the hill and turning right is also very tricky because sometimes you can't see traffic coming up the hill from Main Street. And I've had close calls there several times because literally I haven't seen a very fast vehicle coming until the last minute when I was trying to make a right-hand turn there. And a few years ago, I had suggested that they paint that white bar line across at the top of Pleasant because there was no white line there. And the vehicles turning left off Fobo onto Pleasant were cutting so tight that if you're waiting there to make a turn at a stop sign, you'll almost get your fender knocked off. So I'm very interested in the idea of a stop sign there. So
what came up was when the other time, about 8 or 9 years ago, they were worried about the school buses coming up Faubourg Road from the RPS plant and having to stop on the hill a little bit. But it's exactly like you say, if the trucks are coming up and trying to turn right onto Faubourg, and then you're coming up Faubourg and trying to turn right, there's not an enormous amount of room because some of those trucks take a pretty wide turn, both coming up Faubourg and turning right, except there's not a lot coming up Faubourg turning right as far as trucks. They seem to go on straight, but coming the other way down Faubourg and turning left onto Pleasant, there is a lot of trucks and they turn quite wide. I've seen them come around that corner on 2 wheels.
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Derek. I think CAO, you're going to be sending an email to him. And this topic is an ongoing discussion across the town, not just on Pleasant and Fobo. And we will certainly take it under advisement, and we'll talk with the traffic engineers when we get the data and determine what needs to be done on that spot. So thank you, Derek.
Okay,
Appreciate
just one other thing I could say. We shouldn't be trying to discourage people from parking in the town because it's wonderful to see people walking around the town, spending their money and going into stores. But with parking, if people are speeding, then there's very little margin of error of, especially on Pleasant Street. If they park right on the right-hand side, right by the grocery store there, and then you're coming down, I pull over and I drive on the gravel, but some of them, the road is not marked as far as where the center line is. And who knows what could happen. I mean, you guys did a great job around the cenotaph, because for years there were no yield signs or stop signs at the cenotaph. And I remember I brought that up 8 or 9 years ago, and I don't say I'm the one that got it, brought the idea, but somebody did, and they solved that problem in that there's some semblance of order when you're around the cenotaph now.
Okay.
Thank you very
Gary.
much.
All right. Moving from traffic flow to information and knowledge awareness flow, we'll segue to Ashley Nunn Smith, who is the Chief Librarian for the South Shore Public Libraries Group. And she was going to discuss with us the 50th anniversary of SSPL.
That's right. Thank you. Just pull up my presentation. I may, Your Worship, just while she pulls that up. For those in the gallery, I think you all had an opportunity to see we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with the TVs tonight, so our apologies.
You see the movie of the week go by, just disregard it.
Maybe.
Oh, that's right. That's an outside movie, isn't it? Yeah.
What was the decision of the movie?
It's the latest Maverick.
Top Gun, yeah.
I thought it was last Friday. I thought I missed it.
No,
And if it rains,
so we have.
outside or inside?
Well, no, we moved some of it inside.
Okay.
Soon I understand there's some.
Yeah.
Well, so,
See if I can find it.
in fact, I drove it for the day to pick up the screen again.
No,
Perfect.
I just made it so we can't see the TV.
You got it on your PC.
It's very pretty by time.
Yeah, I know.
Wonderful.
And I'll start.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for having me, Mayor and Council. My name is Ashley Nunn Smith. I'm the new CEO and Chief Librarian for the South Shore Public Libraries. I joined this spring, coming from Ontario, where I led a library system there. And this fall, I'm making the rounds to the 6 municipal councils served by the library to present some highlights of the work that we've done recently in the community. Whether it's viewing local art or coming in over the cold to browse a newspaper, there really is something for everyone. So we just wanted to highlight some of those wonderful things. As you can see on this provincial map, of the 9 regional library systems in the province, I'm very pleased to say that we were second only to Halifax in terms of average weekly number hours per location this past fiscal year, as well as third for in-person visits per capita. So this, despite being a pandemic year, is as if every South Shore resident had visited one of our 5 locations 1.7 times, nearly 2 times in the last year. Our collection supports family literacy, whether you bring items home to read or read together in the library. Numerous studies show that reading together as a family supports early literacy and sets kids up for success in school and beyond. As well, the toys, games, and crafts that we offer inspire imagination and play and a love of narrative and a lifelong association with learning. For many who study or work remotely, which is increasing nowadays, the library is a much needed physical space where they can come away from the distractions of home, the pile of laundry and the dishes to wash. As well, our free Wi-Fi and computer terminals keep costs low for those who might not otherwise have access. Our library service continues to evolve. Here you can see our new custom-built bookmobile, which launched in August of 2021. The in-person visits and circulation remain high. We have one of only 2 bookmobiles still on the road, but it's been on the road for 50 years now. And our Mahone Bay stop here right across from the three churches on Thursdays is the single busiest stop. This January, we launched Same Page, our new catalog. It was after 5 years of planning and implementation. It's one library card for the whole province from end to end, with Halifax being the only exception. They chose to go with their own. So cardholders now have access to a collection of over 1 million items from Yarmouth to Cape Breton that they can bring in and pick up at their own local library. Borrowing remains very high. Despite the dip during the lockdowns and curbside pickup, we are now recovering. We lent over 199,000 physical items and over 35,000 digital items in this past fiscal year. And as you can see, I put them side by side to show the relative borrowing between the physical and the digital. I know we are living in an increasingly digital world, but people do really still like the feel of a book in their hands. In 2022-21, the last fiscal year that we have financial data for the whole province, our expenditures at South Shore Public Libraries were $27.84 per resident. 70% of that funding is provincial, 27% is municipal, and 3% is self-generated. And as you can see, we're on the low end of the scale, fourth from the bottom there. On the other hand, our collection spending per capita is very high. Again, we're second only to Halifax. And we do this by keeping administrative and facility costs relatively low so that we can put a higher percentage of that spending back into the collection. And the results are very positive. Per capita borrowing, we're in third place with people having borrowed a combination of physical and digital, 3.9 items, so nearly 4 items in the course of the last fiscal year per capita. BookNet Canada lists the average book price for that same year, 2021, between $16 and $23. So that would represent a borrowing value to the South Shore residents of between $63 and $89 if they had borrowed those 4 items. Some other services we're pleased to offer our residents. We have distributed over 220,000 boxes of rapid tests since December of last year, each box containing 5 tests, which is an incredible number. They're very popular. People come in every day for them. As well, we offered assistance via the telephone for people booking their vaccine appointments when that was very confusing and hard to navigate online. We would walk people through the process. As well, we printed proof of vaccination papers for free. And we had a program called Caring Calls where we proactively called members in our database, the staff did, just to reach out and see how they were, mostly seniors. And that actually won us an American Library Association International Award for its ability to combat isolation and loneliness during the pandemic. So we're really proud of that program and it's ongoing. We also have a seed library where anyone can come in and take seeds and return them at the end of the harvest if they would like. And then my last section is on programs. So just to highlight some of the ways that that encourages discovery, ongoing learning, and community connection. In this past fiscal year, we offered over 1,000 in-person programs following all COVID-safe protocols, and they were attended by over 5,300 people. Some examples. This is a Dalhousie Supernova camp that was offered in Bridgewater, Lunenburg, and Liverpool. And Dalhousie camp instructors offered STEM activities, science, technology, engineering, and math, during the day, a free summer camp from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., which supported curiosity and learning, and it was especially valuable to those who might not have been able to afford a summer camp otherwise for their kids. We, of course, have Babies and Books, which is for our youngest members. That early exposure to early literacy sets them up for success, and it also helps battle isolation and depression for the new parents. This year, we had an innovative garden program behind the Lunenburg Academy in the community garden plots. We had one on Tuesdays for adults and another one a different day for children. We had our very first Dry Cleaning Story Time on the South Shore. It was a partnership with Lunenburg Pride, that first time partnership, 4 years in the making. We've been talking about it, and we had over 125 attend. Mi'kmaq Moons was also hosted in Lunenburg, which contributed to the education and awareness goals of the Truth and Reconciliation Calls to Action. We had an online teen summer book club so that they didn't have to worry about how they would get transportation to and from the library. And coming up in a few weeks is our Lunenburg Lit Festival's 7th annual. So I wanted to end by noting that it is our 50th anniversary. We produced a short film that I'm gonna use the rest of my time to show. which just highlights what the library means to people and how we've evolved over the last 50 years. Okay. No, it's open.
Excuse me.
Maureen, while we wait for the video, do we have an open spot on the South Shore Library committee, don't we? I think with Kara moving. I think that's interesting.
Will we be advertising?
We'll go to regular.
In December. our
Not
next round, yeah.
Oh,
Well,
when we do that,
yeah, in
yeah.
November.
With the rest of the committees.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
New TV also with 4 buttons.
Yeah.
There you go. Almost. I can see it.
Give it to Joe, he's feeling confident.
Not at all. To make sure my TV's fixed when the kids go back to school. We'll call Kelly.
Oh, no, don't go Kelly.
Can I ask a question of Ashley?
Sure, please, yes.
Ashley, are the current calls still going on?
They are, yeah.
That wasn't just short-term project funding? there was-
No, we are still working our way through the database as well. We have a regular roster of people that we call routinely.
If I may, I know someone that got one of those calls and the person that made the call was just the perfect person.
Yeah.
So it was lovely.
That's Marilyn at our Bridgewater branch.
Yes, I
She's
wasn't
been-
sure, it
yeah.
was always Marilyn.
She's been an employee for a very long time and she has a great.
I'm hoping the TV's gonna pick up the audio from,
If you didn't share sound on Zoom, then
but it's not even playing on the TV. So it's not picking up sound from the television itself.
You mentioned about the digital services. Can I print at the library if I had pages I wanted to print?
Yeah, absolutely. We have standard printers as well as 3D printers that you can use.
Really?
Yeah, the 3D printers are really cool. I've been there and seen people.
Great people. I've heard of people,
Uh-oh.
you know, a part breaks in some kind of equipment they have at
Oh,
home
yeah.
and they can make a new bolt or.
And am I able to borrow resources from any library in the province? And I've got that card
Yes.
and, yeah?
Yeah, for Halifax Public Libraries, we would bring it in as an interlibrary loan. And for all of the other systems, it's completely seamless. When you search the catalog, you're going to see everything. It will tell you which branch it's at, so you know how long you might be waiting, but I'm hearing things are
Okay.
coming even from Cape Breton in 2 or 3 days. So you would just click place hold and you would have your account set up with your favorite location to pick up. That could be the bookmobile here or somewhere else, and then you'd get a notification when it's ready for you.
And is that provincial funding?
It's reimbursed through the province. The items are shipped by mail. So the mail arrives twice a day and we have, you know, the book carts that people
Mhm.
push. It's 3 to 4 book carts full, all the shelves of black mailer bags, and then we unpack them and get them ready for the customer. And that's funded provincially.
Good. Counselor Wilson?
So Lomé is probably the only town in Nova Scotia with an actual bricks and mortars library.
Oh, I don't know about that. Aren't there over 300 towns in Nova Scotia?
I don't think so. But I don't know. So just, in any case, my question really is there any impetus on your part to think about remedying that situation?
Yeah, I believe in an evidence-based decision-making process, so I would certainly look at any option that's presented, any question. I think it would depend on Mahone Bay is in relative proximity to Lunenburg compared to, you know, the distance between some other towns, right? So we'd want to talk to the community and find out, is the distance a barrier? Is the bookmobile versus a brick and mortar something that prohibits them from using the library? We'd have all kinds of questions and then look at the data as well.
But it's not so much a barrier, it's the fact that none of this program is, that you spent most of your time talking
Right.
about, is available in Mahone Bay.
That's true.
It doesn't
Yeah.
exist.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was on that board for quite a while, so the stuff that they have available is just really, really tremendous.
Yeah,
But you have to have a building.
definitely.
If I may, I know that, I don't know, just pre-COVID, the time, but the library did run a summer program for kids here. And they did it in conjunction with the day that the bookmobile was in town.
Mhm.
And I think that went very well. I mean,
We've
I-
offered programming from the bookmobile, absolutely. There are other library opportunities where you can partner with a local organization and offer your programming in a physical space that they have. We're starting a project with the Acadia First Nation at Gold River, where that would be the case, where we would provide programming in their community center, for example. Yeah. We're ready to be ready. All right. Just this over and hit play.
Oh, no.
Maybe there's a book in the library tells you what to plug in.
That's just very much.
Can
If it's not sending.
Well, we
us
just
a-
want-
Kelly?
Well,
Yeah.
can check the other remote?
The good news, we have another meeting on the 28th.
Mhm.
Can you see it?
Yeah, we'll try it, and we might come back.
Yeah.
I probably saw you at the library.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's okay.
I was wondering, are we getting it?
It was-
I'm just wondering if in the interest of time, because we do have a really lengthy agenda,
Yeah,
whether whether Ashley could send us the video, which we could then publish for everybody.
Send it-
On our own social.
on email, yes, and we can put it on our face, on our home website page for the town.
We haven't launched the video yet. We're doing that in sneak peek. Not that it's a secret, but that our official anniversary is this
Okay.
month, September
So-
1972. So
If you would consider when it is ready to go, if you would send us a copy, then,
yes, and
we
in the
can get it
meantime, I
in.
can certainly email it.
I'd love to see that.
Okay.
Yeah, if you can just drop it in that drive I sent you and then I'll just.
Sure.
okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very
Ashley.
much. I have a
Appreciate
question.
it. Yes,
I
please.
didn't get a chance because I was trying to.
No, that's right, you were,
And this is probably might come off center from what you're talking about, but one of the things that I did not see in PowerPoint that in some ways disappoints me is that the library needs to be a learning institution. And part of the reason why there's a change and you're here is because the previous person who was on your seat did some stuff that was very good from a racial perspective. And in what you presented, I don't see the lessons learned from that process. What you're doing going forward to prevent things like that happening, and as an institution that you actually address institutional racism. So I know early days for you, but I would appreciate if that's something that you take to your heart and try to make amends for what's been there in the past.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a great question. We do have an EDI statement and action plan on our website. We have a task force as well. The grant I mentioned with the Acadia First Nation was funded through the Department of Canadian Heritage, specifically the anti-racism and communities. I don't remember the full name of the sub-department, the division. And an additional part of that project will involve staff training in anti-racism, inclusiveness, yes, equity and diversity. So there are things going on. The presentation focused more on the outward facing things the public can access. We do have, we're doing a collection audit currently as well that looks for all various aspects of representation in our collection. So there's a lot of internal work going on, definitely.
I would encourage you to make it visible.
Yeah, definitely.
I guess the harm was visible.
Yeah.
And so it's important that folks who are affected really see that as an institution, you're learning from that and you actually make a change.
Definitely,
Otherwise,
yeah.
you can do all that good stuff in the background, but folks, especially me, I'm like, well, I'm not you're not doing anything.
Yes.
But
The action steps, we can certainly update those with status too as we work through those action steps. And I think you're right, they are on our website, but it would be a good idea to cycle them through maybe the front banner of a webpage just so that to raise awareness. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, indeed.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you for your flexibility.
Indeed.
Librarians are resourceful.
Yes. No day is the same in the library. So we get used to it.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Nunsmith. Let's go right on to our action correspondence. 4.1 is a letter from Tom Webb on climate change. Councillor Vini?
The mayor had the chance to have a nice conversation with Mr. Webb at our meeting at the fire hall last week about municipal boundaries and representation. And it was clear from that conversation, he's very passionate about climate change and all of the issues. I think as per the request to join the international class action suit against international multinational oil companies, while I think Mr. Webb's position on the topic is well known and perhaps even admirable, I think from a municipal government perspective, that is a little out of our wheelhouse. So hearing that, I've moved that item 4.1 be received and filed.
Council seconded. You heard the motion on the item. All in favor? Motion's carried. Comment?
I think we should communicate, I guess, part of the reason why as council, that might not be a very good approach for us. It might be helpful for us
To craft a response with articulating the rationale, which I feel would largely dovetail with some of our policy around proclamations and kind of similar rationale to why we have a proclamation policy. I would say that in lack of a better word, that boilerplate could be leveraged to an appropriate letter back to Mr. Webb.
And then to also just indicate that it's not that we're not doing anything on climate change. Indicate some of the things we're doing in terms of our.
We declared a climate emergency
Yeah.
how many years ago? Right?
Three now.
If I may, so the response to, and I would appreciate a motion to direct staff to make that response, but if I could just get the cart before the horse a little bit, the response would be that the town council feels that this, I wrote down what you said largely dovetails with their policy proclamations, but it's somewhat akin to making a proclamation which is against policy. And then I'm sorry, Deputy Mayor, your point about.
But we are committed to addressing climate change, and these are some of the things we're doing.
Like the piece.
What?
I mean, the town's response to climate change, both through previous motions about the climate change emergency and our actions that we've taken that can be denoted in many ways, whether it's EV chargers, solar gardens, decisions to buy power from ND Power with a third of the carbon footprint. I mean, there's a long list of things that community has stepped up to.
Yep. Okay, so you would like a motion to direct staff to craft this response?
Yes, please.
Okay. Mover of the motion,
So
Okay, seconded. Well, we still have the other
We still
motion
have
on
the
the
motion.
floor, though. We either have to
So-
adapt the old one, or else we vote on that one and do this one.
Well, let's just send the letter back
Well,
in
we voted on
response.
this first.
Pardon me?
We voted on
No, I thought that we cut in.
I
the
think we
middle.
did,
cut
I,
That's
you know, I
when
thought,
Francis brought it up.
Mayor, if we're going to respond with the letter, I think that would be fine, and therefore I retract the motion to receive the file.
Thank you. So your motion,
Yeah,
okay, is to direct staff to craft the response as we've been discussing and send it. Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Feeney. On this motion, on the question, all in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to 4.2. Michael Brown, president of the Mahone Bay Legion, wants to request to place a sign at the cenotaph. I think it's on his 100th anniversary, isn't it, coming up?
Yes,
Yeah,
in 2023.
yeah.
Mayor, I had a question for the deputy CAO, if I could, about item 4.2 relative to item 4.7.
That is correct.
so-
We messed up.
I still, I didn't, I've read that a few times, that is the same, that's the same correspondence action item.
Yes, my
Okay.
apologies.
Fair
She
enough.
thought it was so important, she put it in.
Yeah, it's like,
Didn't want anyone to miss it.
Okay. It's block white lettering, forest green background. It's a standard sign designed by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission.
you have a question?
I'm sorry, Councillor Carver.
Thank you. I, in principle, certainly support this idea, but I do have a question as to whether this is a temporary sign or is it intended to be permanent? I'd assume it's temporary because it's marking the centennial, but then there's a reference at the end to this stone foot marker. But I think that it's just asking for approval of the centennial marker, which I assume is temporary. So I've answered my own question, I hope.
Okay.
I'm sure we got it.
If I may, that last sentence does say the branch is also considering a stone foot marker, but that will depend on the availability of funding within the branch. So if council were to pass a motion to approve this request, it would be very helpful for staff to know whether that was based on a temporary sign or if it also applied if they were able to place a permanent foot marker. Just for down the road, if they're going to be fundraising.
Low profile metal sign anchored with steel pickets.
It almost sounds to me like it's permanent.
Yes, it's marking the fact that
That
that thing has
100th
been there
anniversary
for
was-
100 years.
Yeah, I think it's supposed to be permanent.
That's what I picked
So
up when I
So
read
the
it.
stone foot marker would be a permanent one.
Well, so would the other one.
The other one?
No,
That the way it reads.
I was,
So they're gonna anchor it.
I was left with the impression that we had a centennial, permission to place a centennial marker at the foot of the monument to commemorate the occasion. And then they're also considering this more permanent item. I'd suggest the more permanent item, which they're still considering, we would deal with when they finish considering it and they come to council with a request.
Can we ask Mr. Brown to clarify? We can
Hmm.
address it again at the next meeting. It wouldn't take long to do it, but whatever. Deputy Mayor?
my question is, does it make a difference?
Oh, doesn't matter to
I
me.
don't see us saying, no, don't put a marker on that, so,
As long as it's within the,
yeah, and then I think for me, we should just approve for them to put a marker that's within what they've requested.
Uh-huh.
If they change that, then they have to come with a different request.
Okay,
Rather than.
that's doable. Councillor Carver, are you comfortable with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
no, I just, it had left me feeling uncertain about what it might entail, but I certainly support the idea and would be happy to make a motion to support the request.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilson?
I have a question if I may.
You do.
Yeah, I do. For clarity, is the proposed motion to approve the low profile metal sign anchored with steel pickets? Or the stone foot marker? That's what I'd like to clarify if we're coming back again, or if it's just approval for what they want to
I think
do.
it's
to
for
it.
both if they want.
I think we're approving their request.
Their plan.
Okay,
Not-
That was my intent.
Okay.
Which is just the placement of the centennial marker.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So we've got a motion, we've got a seconder, we've got clarification on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to four. We had Kathy and Sebastian Andrews discussion already. The Code of Conduct Working Group and DMHA, the Code of Conduct Consultation Survey. Councillor Carver?
Well, I don't think we have had forgive me, but I don't think we have had the discussion on the Andrea request about, because there were several items that came up in the letter as well as the presentation tonight. And one of them being, in her letter, Kathy Andrea suggested that we request a bylaw officer report.
If I may, we are not able to, we cannot comment publicly on an open file. So with any enforcement action, there is a very specific process. And we are not able to publicly comment on an open file. So we could not provide a staff report on an open file. I can say that at this time, the bylaw enforcement officer is in regular communication with the Andreas and various neighbors in the area. Once the file is closed, whatever that may be.
How
Then-
could the file be closed, given the situation?
So if I were to make a complaint against a bylaw complaint, something to do with you, Councillor Feeney, for example, just to use you as an example, if I may, that file cannot be closed until that complaint and that issue has been entirely resolved. If I were to then have another complaint about you, that's another issue that needs to be resolved before that file can close.
But are you suggesting a council can't request information to find out how many traffic tickets that have been written over the course of the summer and that associated with that parking variance?
That is, we can answer questions about a parking ticket, but about the
Yeah, well, so we.
I'm having to be very careful and I apologize for that, but there is a lot of information in that letter.
Like how would council become informed to the extent of the issue if we're unable to ask how extensive the issue is, as I don't understand how we're not allowed to get that information.
If I might, Councillor Carver
Yes.
is bursting with information.
Yes, I
here.
asked well, I had asked a question, and if I may have a follow-up question, which is, may council receive a report from the bylaw officer in closed session?
I can definitely get as much information as we are able to share with council. So I can't get into the specifics about, I mean, if you read that letter, there are a number of different points. I can't say, this is, I can tell you this about this and this about this, because we've received several questions just from the Andreas. So I can't tell you right now, but I will get something together for council to get you as informed of the situation as we are able. So I certainly don't want to seem as if we're keeping information back, but this is one of those situations where we, if you recall from your council orientation, the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act, we're right on that. There's the protection of privacy and the freedom of information. We are absolutely on that line right now. So I will get as much information together for council as I'm able. And, but we cannot prepare a staff report. For a
So,
board meeting.
so the item is under action items.
Yes, because there is a request of council.
But I guess, Councilor Peters' question is, how can we act if we have no information? Sorry.
Deputy Mayor was waiting. He's next. Please, sir.
It puts you in a difficult position, but may be very helpful for for folks listening or just being part of this process to really understand why council cannot get the information they need to make that decision based on what a resident has requested us to receive.
Mhm.
So is it the MGA that's preventing us? You say freedom of information. It might be very helpful to share what aspects of freedom of information might be impacted, so that there's a little bit of clarity. But I still go back to a question around, even if it's not a formal written report, whether the bylaw enforcement officer can come and meet council in closed session, so that we can get some background, to some of the back and forth that might be happening without any. We don't need to know names, but at least to have a better understanding of what the situation actually is, rather than just based on this letter making a decision based on this. Because right now we cannot. It's very difficult to make a informed decision with what we have. We can see one side of the story. We can't see the enforcement side of the story.
May I answer?
Pardon me?
May I answer that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so, as you say, this is one side of the story in front of council. As they say, every story has three sides, and when we get into a community, I'd up that to at least 5 or 6. If you think about it, what you see in front of you is someone being accused of things. So that, if you think about it that way, that gives you some information as to why we're not in a position to be able to say this thing, this thing, this thing, because you have one side of the story in front of you. From a purely logistics point of view, whenever we have any enforcement situation, we have to be prepared for the fact that enforcement, and there's a very specific process that goes through an investigation and enforcement and many steps along the way. If something were to result in a potential charge, if this is something, if that issue were discussed in a public meeting, if it were that issue and the details of that issue were, I'm sorry, it is very difficult, and I apologize, I'm having to choose my words very carefully. If that information were discussed in a public meeting, that then compromises and potentially destroys the ability to actually enforce. So if something were to end up in, if a file were to end up in issuing a summary offense ticket, if issuing a long form, something where someone went to court, even fines, that's the way the enforcement process works, because then we get into the legal system. But then, yes, we have a letter in front of us asking for a report that would then require names to be used. So that is where we get into issues about the information we're sharing, in addition to the primary concern, really from a logistical perspective, from the town's point of view, is our ability to enforce.
So, Mayor, just to clarify, I really find this unsatisfactory. We have an agenda, we have a letter from a citizen with a request to council. The request is crystal clear. I would implore council to request a bylaw report from the town's enforcement officer. So we're in the middle of the meeting, and now we're being told we're not allowed to ask for the report. It would have been helpful to know that before the meeting started. So if we can't act upon the request, why is it in the action item? And if we can't, we don't need to litigate it anymore this evening. But if we can't respond to it, then I think the appropriate thing would be to receive and file it, as we have no other choice but to do that.
Okay, Councillor no? Councillor now.
Question you might be able to answer, might not be able to answer, and I don't remember. When this business started up, so that, was there a development agreement involved?
No, this is permitted by right. There was a variance that came to council for a parking variance. But I can say this, the issue with parking in that end of town, and we actually have spoken about it over the last few months when we do the end of month staff report to council, and we talk about the ongoing parking issues at that end of Main. The biggest problem with parking down there is that it's different people. And at the end of the day, people are choosing to park under a no parking sign. So staff have been working with some of the residents down there, talking about, basically have said that we would be open to having a discussion about some sort of, and I always forget the term, but basically it's some sort of letter of understanding or something that's called that, maybe we talk about a hedge or something like that, knowing that that is, people are intentionally looking at the no parking sign and going for it anyway. Our bylaw enforcement officer gets calls and he's in frequently. I mean, the 1 day a week thing, he's in there a lot. If I may also speak, Your Worship, to the placement of this letter, all we can do is follow the policy that we have. And the policy says that if there's requesting action, that's what we do. Staff can only work with the policy that we have. And I know it's
Because we
frustrating.
didn't have 10 minutes in that conversation. Ken.
A follow-up to your last one, and then Councillor Carter.
Just, okay, so they started off with a B&B type place, that type of thing, with a restaurant. So they can change and all of a sudden expand their hours to include liquor and all this stuff without having to have a development agreement? Or there's something in place there? You said it by right, so I'm just wondering.
I'm not the development officer. I can't get into,
No.
and I wouldn't dare to get into the.
No, but I'm
the
just thinking,
intricacies. But it is a commercially zoned area. There was some existing business. The difference is that there's a new business in there that they did put in a patio when they put in the outdoor pizza oven, and it's incredibly popular. That's.
Yeah, I don't know.
Councillor Carver and Councillor King.
Just a clarification and then a question, that it's restricted commercial, so not commercial.
I don't have that in front of me, so I'll.
Well, the planning map that I looked at today said RC, which I think is restricted commercial, which has different standards from the regular commercial zone. And so my comment, and it may be leading to a motion, is to echo Councillor Feedy's concern about our apparent inability to obtain more information about the context of this situation, which I personally, as a councillor, feel is serious. If we are allowing one property to create a situation where we receive a letter like this, something is happening, and I would like to know more. So I'm going to make a motion that we arrange for information as possible under the regulations from the bylaw officer to further understand the situation.
Okay,
Well, I'll second the motion, Mayor, but to spur on conversation, but I mean, Councillor Carver is probably the best wordsmith around the table, and isn't that remarkably similar to requesting a report from the bylaw officer? Isn't that the fundamental request from the homeowner?
In whatever manner is possible
So
under the regulations.
If we're allowed to do that, then let's approve it. But if we've been told we can't do it, then
I'm not accepting. I made a
Fair
motion.
enough. Fair enough.
Has it been seconded?
I'm happy to second.
Councillor
I'm happy
Feeney
to second.
seconded it.
Happy to second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Carver, could you repeat your motion, please?
Oh, I'm not sure I can.
Is it in order, Mayor?
What I wrote down, oh, sorry, go ahead, Kim.
The council arrange for information as possible under the regulations from the bylaw officer to further understand the situation.
So this is to the council only, right? It's not to go to the correspondent.
No.
It's to come to council only.
I
for our
feel
eyes
it's
only.
council giving direction to the bylaw enforcement officer to
Give us a report.
investigate what they are complaining about. And he would come back to council and say, yes, it is in compliance or it is not. Right?
Okay, it's hard to develop a motion on the fly, but perhaps it should go, that council direct staff to arrange for feedback from the bylaw enforcement officer in whatever manner is possible under the regulations.
Yes, please.
I just wanted to clarify, to your point about, we go to council and not the people writing the
I
letter.
was just asking.
Our issue is with a public meeting, but our bylaw enforcement officer does keep in regular contact with the people that wrote
Mhm.
the letter.
Yeah.
He can have a conversation with, a complainant about what is going on. But the issue is that we are in a public meeting.
Yeah.
And of course, he is the enforcement officer. He's very aware of what he can share. He can follow up on what he's done and the conversations he's had, and you can see that
That was my
reflected in the
point
letter.
with that.
Yeah.
So we could hear from the bylaw enforcement officer in camera.
I will,
Let's defer
my
this.
understanding of the motion is that arrange for information as possible. So I
Okay.
will speak with him and figure out the best way to proceed and advise council once we have had a chance to wrap our heads around that a little bit.
Sorry to press.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, just to get clarification, I think one of the things you mentioned is that we can get public information if the file closes or the enforcement ends. The first initial, I guess, letter we received is probably 3 months ago,
Yes, yeah, 3 months ago.
right? So from my perspective, within 3 months, at least we should have enforced something. So I'm sort of feeling that, well, this kicks the ball down the road and doesn't really help us in terms of the public, public fixing elements of how this decision is being made. So is there a way that we as council can get this file dealt with soon so that by the next council meeting, we have a report about what's happened?
But given the fact that it was 3 months ago, you're quite right that we got the letter.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know what the enforcement officer has found out about the allegations. Right?
If
The
there's a
bylaws
charge,
are either
there's a
theirs
charge,
or not.
right?
If I may answer that,
Let's just. So the staff's in a tough spot.
Yeah.
We don't know really what we're allowed to ask for. We definitely don't know how to craft an elegant motion that will be above board. So I think Councilor Carver's motion was fine and we probably all support it, but it's probably worth our while just to defer this to the 28th. Deputy CAO and the CAO, when he's back in the province, can discuss about our best approach forward. We'll have some appropriate motions crafted for the next meeting and we'll fully debate this again 2 weeks from now. But I did think, given the time and the fact that we don't know if the motion's even in order, like we can't pass a motion to ask staff to do something that they don't have the authority to do. So why don't we wait to find out what the authority to act is, and then we'll act accordingly 2 weeks from now. Anyway, that's so I think if Council Carver rescinds her motion and we move to a deferral for 2 weeks, we probably end up in a better place 2 weeks from now, or otherwise we'll be having the same conversation at the end of the month. That's just one opinion.
Your worship, I would actually suggest that I would be better off to have the motion. Because I suspect we'd have the same conversation on the 28th. The question in front of us with Councillor Carver's motion is, what can the bylaw enforcement officer and I come up with that is information that can be shared to help council know? Can we think about how we can share what we can share? But if we just defer it to the 28th, we're kind of going to have the same conversation.
Just as long as there's understanding what the expectation is.
Yeah,
Like if the expectation is when we get the report 2 weeks from now, sorry, we can't give you any information because we're precluded based on some bylaw, people aren't going to be very happy. So I just think we should make sure, if you don't want to get on the life raft and kick the can for 2 weeks and get this right, fair enough, we'll take our chances and we'll see where we are 2 weeks from now. So hearing that, Mayor,
Hopefully
I
staff.
call
will-
for a vote, please.
Hopefully staff will be able to discuss it with the bylaw enforcement officer and see what his opinion is on it and what he's standing so far, so.
Okay, Deputy
So
Mayor,
I'm sorry to drag this a bit further. My motion would have been to direct staff, which means the bylaw officer, to deal with this file in the next 2 weeks, so that by the time we get to the next meeting, we have a report.
I think that's what I said, Deputy Mayor.
We can't do that. We can't close any part of it because the file is continuing. I don't know what part, there are many issues in there. And what it comes down to is we have an employee of the town who has a great deal of experience in enforcement. Every single one of these involves any numbers of conversations. And again, this is where we get into the weeds with this. What can I tell you? What can't I tell you? But that file cannot be closed in the next 2 weeks.
So if we can't close it and we can't receive a report until it's closed, what do we do?
And another question. If, so it's to the benefit of Kathy and Sebastian for us, for council to have a very good conversation about this. If they retracted some of the issues and focused on one element that needs to be enforced, does that give us a report at the end of this all? Because so what I'm seeing right now is a situation whereby we can't act on something that was given to us 3 months ago. We're kicking the can down the road, and then come December, we'll be doing the same thing because the file hasn't closed, because there's more complaints that are coming up. That doesn't help us. So maybe the elements of it that can be closed, and we deal with what has been closed. When I look at some of the land use bylaws that have been quoted here, for me, it sort of seems very, very simple. There's either a violation or there isn't.
Bingo.
If I may suggest that line of questioning assumes that staff have not answered those questions. That question assumes that staff have not responded. That assumes that staff have not investigated. So yeah, that's where we are.
But if the bylaw enforcement officer was to make a statement that he has investigated and there is no bylaw that appears that anyone's in contravention of in this case, that's the end of it. Now, does that mean we can still change the bylaws in the future to respond to what the citizens are saying there's a hole in what we're doing? But if our bylaw enforcement officer has investigated and hasn't found anything.
Similar, sorry for jumping in, similar to when we were dealing with the nursing home, right? That was still ongoing, but we still got feedback that there was no violation that was going on, but that file was still active. So I don't know why this would be different.
Councillor Carver.
Your worship, I would like to call for the vote, and in order to do that, we have to have a vote by council as to whether we want to call for the vote, or has everybody had a chance to speak?
Think everyone has had a chance to speak on the motion. Right? Are you calling the question, Councillor Carver?
Yes, I am not calling the question. I'm asking that you ask for the vote.
Okay,
According to the,
let's read the motion again.
I'm
Please.
ready to vote.
All right.
Fair enough.
That council directs staff to arrange for feedback from the bylaw enforcement officer in whatever manner is possible under the regulations.
Okay. We got a seconder, Councillor Feeney. On the question, all in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay.
Excuse me, Your Worship, in relation to some of the other issues that were raised, there are some that I would like more information about in terms of how they might be implemented in terms of parking safety and so on in that area of town. And I'm not quite sure where that kind of conversation can be held.
Would it be helpful if I went through the letter and just sort of gave you a quick rundown on where we are with some of these? So for the number one, parking, we are aware of the parking conditions. As I said, it is a situation where individuals are choosing to park under no parking sign. Our bylaw enforcement officer comes into town in the evenings and weekends and daytimes, and essentially people continue to do that. So in addition to what's happening, he's also conducting a survey of what do other parking tickets cost in other areas. We're looking into finding other ways, you know, as you're aware that if someone skips out of town and leaves their electric bill, for example, we can connect it to the provincial system so that when they go to, say, register their car again, it turns up. We're looking into extending our reach with enforcement because that is essentially the issue down there, is that people are making the choice to do it, and they're different people. Late night noise, council has directed staff to follow up with a report about Lunenburg's new noise bylaw, and we're anticipating that probably October because we want to see how the summer season goes with that first new bylaw, and there is motion on the agenda later this evening. Smoke, that is something that a person would have to follow up with any number of regulations because that comes into a great deal of different areas. There's compost smell and maggots. That's the type of thing that a person would connect with the, as noted here, Lunenburg, with the Community Recycling Center enforcement. Then, of course, there are the specifics about dealing with the development officer. And when it comes to council's consideration of those particular issues, I believe, Councillor Carter, what you were getting at, if I'm correct, that what about these as larger issues? I think that's where we're going with Plan Mahone Bay, is looking at that and what do we want in our community as a whole, like all over our community, what do we want? So does that answer, does that help a little bit with what you're trying to get at?
Yes, in part, thank you. And there were other ideas possibly about, are there other ways of enhancing safety for emerging onto the street, such as the yellow lines that are painted along sidewalks by curb cuts, by driveways? I mean, I don't want to take more time tonight, but maybe we can come back to that.
The safety issues that cars are parked where they shouldn't be. There's a reason that cars are not allowed to be parked on that's signed, no parking. So that's the safety issue, is that
It's
they're
the other
creating-
side.
Yeah, you can park on the other side of the street.
Yeah, but they're, right, it's creating problems on the other side too. So at any rate, I think we spent a lot of time tonight. We probably need to move on, but so I'll ask questions further down the road.
Okay. Let's go to our code of conduct survey. That was item 4.5. The
I
survey
think the
is,
deadline's
open.
coming up, right? To fill it
It
in.
is, yes, yeah. So if you haven't done so,
Duly noted.
consider doing it, all right? Let's go, anything else on 4.5?
Just to receive and file, Mayor.
Okay. Let's go to motion 4.6.
Mayor, note that the email from Peter Mary was on July 27th, and I think subsequent to that timeline, I think it's become publicly known that we're having the major community event on the 19th of October for the solar garden.
Mhm.
That's what we're
That's
suggesting.
what we're
and yeah,
suggesting, so I suggest and move that we correspond with the Reds and inform them about the
Public
timing
session.
of that event, where I believe the answers to the questions that they note in their correspondence will be addressed.
And I think a lot of those answers are in the field, even as we speak. And that'll be advertised through newsletters and postings and,
we, I mean, there's a public engagement plan draft on the agenda later on, and that's definitely something that we'll be looking at. Once
okay,
council gives us the okay to go ahead with that, we are We'll get that information out there.
So we will receive and file 4.6. 4.7 is a repeat.
Mayor, I'd move that council direct staff to prepare a report on the request from Dr. Gaffardi and Mahmoodi regarding access and vegetation at their property and report back to council.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Now. You've heard the motion against item 4.8. Councillor Kerber? Councillor Feeney, would you repeat your motion or?
Sure, motion to direct staff to prepare a report on the request from Dr. Gaffardi and Mahmoodi and report back to council. Thank you.
But
Yep.
I was under the impression that several months ago, when the same request came to us, I'm talking 6 months, maybe, we already sent it off to the engineers for their perusal and presumably report back. Have we heard anything?
If I could jump in here quickly, we, yes, we did receive a request from the Gaffardi Mahmoodi family some time ago. There has been some discussion about that, but the Gaffardi Mahmoodi family has not received an official response from the town. So that's the request. So Councillor Feeney's motion, I would suggest, is a good one so that all the information is out there, all the information is at hand in public session for council to direct staff to send off a response accordingly. That would be, I would suggest, a good way to go.
Yeah, I'm just requesting a report from council that will, I'm sure, detail the pros cons about the request.
Yeah.
So council can evaluate and decide if it's going to be granted down, in a timely manner.
We have a seconder? Councillor Now,
Can I just interject? for a
on the
moment?
question?
Just to make sure that when we do this, I presume it'll be some sort of a review that will do provincial engineering stuff and provincial road regulations and so on, that we do need to bear in mind a couple of things. And one is that I know that these are grandfathered situations. My situation is actually very similar to the doctor's in the sense that I have a laneway that goes over town land, and it's an easement through the town property portion, which I maintain, and that road ends up with 3 surveyed lots, none of which are adjacent to any street in town, legal or otherwise. So if it's good enough for me, I would hope it would be good enough for them.
Deputy Mayor.
Trying to figure out what's the best way to say this. I think Mahmoodi's request, Gaffardi Mahmoodi's request had come quite a while back.
5 years ago.
Yeah, and then when we had a conversation previously, we were going a direction of being favorable to seeing something come out of that. I'm slightly worried that getting a report coming back, we're just having a back and forth about an issue that I think at the end of the day, we as council need to make it won't be, the decision that we're going to make won't be necessarily guided by an engineering report or what gets in there. It's whether we as council actually want to work with the Mahmoodis to get them access to the back of the property. And so I would encourage us to say, we want to see this done in a way that actually is safe and in a way that actually provides the benefits to them and the benefits to the town, rather than having this very long 5 years plus protracted thinking about the issue. And so the question at the back of why 6 months ago this file went to staff and nothing ever came back in a timely manner to council for us to have that deliberation, but I will unpack that for now. I don't want us to get to that situation again. So if we're putting in a motion for us to get a report, let's put in a motion with a timeline that sort of says, bring this to council and let's make a decision going forward. Either say yes, they can go ahead, or say no, and they can make decisions as to what they want to do with their life rather than being forced.
you want to put a date on it?
Deputy Mayor,
Councillor
you
Healy?
thinking the Thanksgiving, the meeting after Thanksgiving weekend, that kind of timeline?
Yeah.
First meeting.
The only, if I may say, the only issue is the CAO wanted us to, have this, if, I don't know when is their timeline, but he said that I have to put the request earlier to be here.
I mean, I think that Deputy Mayor, that was the context.
Yeah.
About considering the issues around the screening, the vegetation management, the cost associated with that was discussed last month. So I think there's a timeliness to this decision that's required. So I don't know what's reasonable from the staff to come back with a comprehensive report, whether that can be done for the 28th or whether we need to defer it till middle of August. But what does council thinks reasonable? October, pardon me, October. Okay.
Yeah, I believe that the thought is to have something for the end of September meeting, but that's fine. We can put it in for October and feed it. That would be fine.
I'm saying September.
If we can get it to September, then that'd be better.
Councillor Carver,
Couldn't we include something in the motion that would pick up the issues that Deputy Mayor just raised? So that staff would provide some options that could potentially support the Gathari Mahmoodi request.
That's a good.
I think as the Deputy Mayor said, do you want to lean into it and try to make this work? Or do you want to default to, it's never, a no? And personally, I think in a perfect world, we try to, as discussed both in the letter and by the presentation earlier this evening, there are a number of pros. There might be a few cons, and do we think, based on the relative weight, do we think there are more pros than cons? And if the answer to that is yes, then let's try to be helpful. Anyway, I'm sure that'll all be fully fleshed out in the report if we can get it approved to be received to me.
so where does that leave the wording of our motion now?
It's perfect.
Yeah. Mayor, I think out of courtesy, I think I would be more inclined to give until the October 10th meeting or the October 12th meeting. And if staff can report
Before?
then
Yeah.
I think we'd all be pretty pleased.
Okay,
It doesn't need to be in the motion, but the notion about the decision that needs to be made on the screening, maybe just staff being aware that whatever that, I guess, confluence of decisions needs to be made, we can either rush or.
If I may, as Dr. Ghaffari just said, he had a meeting with the CAO and this letter was expected. So the CAO is up to date on this and is expecting this, and yeah, so yes, all of these things are.
so he's got a plan.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sounds good.
So has the motion been amended to reflect the ideas that Deputy Mayor suggested about providing some
date,
options?
the October
I don't think
12th
we
date
need a
was another thing on the motion.
That is the October 12th date, but
But providing
there wasn't a
some
first or second or to a specific amendment to the motion, so if you want to make an amendment to the motion, I can record that.
Just need a little bit of clarity. We need
Yeah.
some words to.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I gave some words the first time
Well,
around.
I'm fully expecting that the CAO is going to come back with a report that's going to be comprehensive,
Mm-hmm,
provide council with rationale to make the decision that they're going to make.
okay.
And if they're not, then there's always an opportunity to ask for yet another report.
So we are passing the motion with that understanding and intent.
It's
But the
comprehensive.
CAO is gonna come back with a comprehensive report that we're requesting
Yes.
by the 12th of October, that is either going to rationalize a yes or a no or a perhaps decision. I mean,
A yes or a no.
I hope no, perhaps.
well, perhaps is because you get conditions attached to a yes, then it becomes a perhaps, right?
We all happy with that?
Yeah.
Okay?
Okay.
Moved and seconded. On the motion, all in favor? Go, we're good tonight. We're just zipping right along here. We're almost halfway through.
We
I'd
got
just
your,
like to ask a question, we're gonna take off, but when is the question period at the end?
What is it?
When is it? Is it before or after the closed session that we watch the?
Before.
Before.
yes,
the
before
closed
the
session?
closed
And
session.
we don't have a closed.
We don't
session.
have a closed session tonight.
It's on the agenda.
It's always on there, but only
Yeah.
if we need
Yeah, but
it.
there's nothing under it. There's just
It's
a
always
heading,
there.
but there's-
Mhm.
It's like new business. There's not.
They try to fool us, so then we get right happy because there's nothing in it.
All right, well, we're just a little disappointed that the petition didn't make it on tonight. I understand the short notice,
It'll be on the next meeting's agenda.
and a little disappointed with the conversation around Peter and Mary's letter. It seemed a bit light, but I'll come back to it later.
Okay?
Okay,
All right, let's go, Dr. Gafari, please come. So now we move to information items. What is your wish, council?
I would move that we receive and file items 5.1 to 5.8.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. On the motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, staff reports. This is the first of the month. This is the easy one.
easy one, yeah,
Yeah. Acting CAO.
lots of stars.
I guess we'll start with the, does anybody have any questions?
Like this.
There we go.
There we go. Don't know how that managed to happen, but it did.
So yes, as Councilor Feeney said, a lot of stars. And you'll also note there are a few things we're expecting for the end of September. Just finishing up as everybody gets back to the regular swing of things and people are answering our emails again.
Councillor Carver?
Yes, thank you. Could you remind us again when we're expecting the draft documents from Upland for the plan review?
You will get an email about that very soon. We're actually going to be sending something out suggesting that we have the meeting scheduled for the November PAC date and time. And so we'll have to review that with the full membership of the steering team, make sure we can make that happen. And then the plan would be to have the drafts to all the steering team members at least 2 weeks in advance. And I can't recall that exact how far, but we have had that conversation with Upland and we're expecting that very soon. So it's the thing that always bumps ahead a little bit in my day timer, but you will soon be getting that information. And as I said, expect that we'll be looking to see if people can have that first meeting, having had a chance to have some time with those documents so we can have that conversation by the November PAC time.
Why November?
Because there's time required to there needs to be, it's our understanding that council needs some time to have the documents in front of them. Yes.
Just
Deputy Mayor?
So my worry is that one of the reasons why staff mentioned we're delaying things so that we can engage the community on a face-to-face. And when the weather becomes inclement, then potential participation might dwindle. And we're losing that window pretty quickly. And so I would have hoped that we would have tackled that pretty soon and actually get the documents out so that by that November, we're actually doing the public engagement, not waiting for December when it's when people like me don't actually want to come out.
So Upland was waiting for some information and they now have that. And the CAO and I had a meeting with them I think the week before last, possibly the previous week. And we had a conversation about how long it would take them to get the drafts ready. And again, I don't have the timeline in front of me when we were expecting to have those documents in front of steering team members. And that's certainly something we've heard repeatedly, is that steering team members want a fair amount of time with the documents, with the drafts in advance of the meeting.
Yeah, there's,
Counselor Now.
Yeah, just under number 22, with regard to the old fire station. So will we receive the Turner Drake report before it comes to the meeting? Because I'm kind of concerned that come this winter, our public works are still gonna be in this old building back here. We're still gonna have snow clearing equipment that's sitting outside that has to be cleared before they can even use it. Whereas we have a place where we can put that equipment, you know, even on a trial basis for this winter. You know, I think we should try to move that along ASAP so that, you know, I think it's kind of, I don't think we're gonna get enough out of that building to build another building. And I think that building can be maintained, and with a little bit of work every year, just a little maintenance, that it can be maintained for the public works staff, and they'll have a perfectly good place to work on their equipment, store their equipment, and not have to get out in the snowstorm and clear equipment before they can even go plow.
Good point. Counselor Carver?
So I was just going to comment that sounded like a notice of motion coming.
Well, I will certainly do that. I will notice a motion that at our next meeting, I will make a motion that we move public works into the old fire station, at least for this winter on a trial basis.
Thank you. Counselor Carver?
May I ask one more question about the Uplands?
One.
But-
That's it, one.
Which is, I find it remarkable that it's been over a year since we've heard from them. I think our last meeting, last hearing about them was July 2021. And is there any information about why it's taken so long?
I defer that to the CAO. Maybe you could pose that question at the next meeting. That would be better place for that.
And in adjunct to that, I do hope we're not going to get the paperwork from the study people, the Uplands people, who are going to say, now we've got 3 days, and then we want you to come in and talk about it. Because that's not acceptable. Absolutely not acceptable. It's a very extensive, complex document, as we saw, and I want more than 3 days to look it over.
Your worship, as I was saying earlier, we're looking at least a couple of weeks for members of the steering team to have
Okay.
that information in front of them.
But, yeah, okay. Let's have a way of changing. Counselor
I
Carver?
move that we receive the staff report as information.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Counselor Now seconds. On the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Let's go to the council vacancy and special election.
That to me, your worship.
Certainly is.
Okay, so as
You know all the secret stuff that's going on.
and for the members of the viewing public, that was a joke. So council is aware that we have received a resignation from Councillor Alice Burdick. So we are now in a position where we have a vacancy on council, which will necessitate that the town hold a special election. Elections are very legislated, obviously. So in the report in front of you, you will see the rationale and the references to what gets down to the dates that we would we proposed for the election. We're proposing Saturday, November 26th. That's the outside end of what we're able to do, especially in the case of a special election. Nobody's expecting it. So it gives people a little more time to be aware that this is coming up and consider whether they want to run, consider who they might want to vote for, what they might be thinking about the election. So we proposed Saturday, November 26th as the ordinary polling day for the special election. Based on that, we've proposed October 25th as the nomination day. And special election advance polls, the Tuesday prior to the ordinary polling day is one of the advance poll days. There are a couple of options for the first special polling day. In Mahone Bay, we have traditionally gone with the Saturday just previous to the ordinary polling day, and council's recommending we continue that. That gives a work day, a Monday to Friday day and a Saturday, a weekend day. So hopefully that makes it as accessible as possible. On that note, we are also proposing that we hold another paperless election. Certainly that we get into alternative voting, but the paperless election, I think, worked really well. There is definitely an opportunity for people to vote if they want to come into the polling station. We were able to provide support for anyone that had any questions. They just vote on an iPad instead of with a piece of paper. The other recommendations are about hiring a temporary returning officer. Clearly, staff are maxed. In 2018, when we had a special election, we were able to hire a person who is a returning officer for another municipality. That would be our first try to see if we can do that first. That would be someone that is familiar with the election process, and again, especially within a special election time is of the essence. And your report includes a budget for the election.
So it costs more to run an election for one councillor than it does for all 7 or 6.
I will note that we saved, we had the actuals versus what we budgeted in the last election, and it has traditionally been that we end up over budgeting for a returning officer, but we continue to budget that way because we need that person to do the work. If there are issues, if there are problems, it
That's
would be
fine. No,
much better
I was just commenting.
well, and also, of course, inflation in the last year has made a big difference. Just the when we ran the numbers on the advertisements and that sort of stuff has made a big difference.
Hmm.
Your worship, I'm prepared to start the motioning off. If that's appropriate. The council set Saturday, November 26, 2022 as ordinary polling day for the 2022 special election.
You just go around the table.
Second.
So, yeah.
Seconded. You've heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Mayor, I move the council set Tuesday, October 25th, 2022 as the nomination day for the 2022 special election.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Your worship, I move that council set Saturday, November 19th, 2022 and Tuesday, November 22nd, 2022 as advanced poll days for the 2022 special election.
All in favor? Motion's carried.
Mayor, I would move that council approve hiring a temporary returning officer for the 2022 special election.
Seconded by the deputy mayor. All in favor? Motion's carried.
I'd like to move that council resolve to hold a paperless election for the 2022 special election.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Now. All in favor? And the last one.
Council approve a special election budget of $17,500 to be drawn from operating reserves.
Seconded by Councillor Feeney. All in favor? The motion is carried. So, October 25th. Okay. All right. Anything else, CAO? on that one?
I don't think, I don't know if anybody has any other questions or anything like that, but
No, no questions. All right. Then let's move on to, sorry,
Just reminded, I think we need to accept the resignation and thank Councillor Biden for her.
Didn't we do that?
I don't believe
No?
it is, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
by all means.
So, do you need a motion? I can move that,
I think it would be nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what this
I'll
comes,
second that.
Yeah.
Adding with regret.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
thanking her for her contributions to council. Move seconded by Councillor Carver. Looking for a unanimous vote. All in favor? Motion is carried.
I wonder what would happen if we refuse.
Too bad to say.
Try to get out and they pull you back in.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for reminding us of that one.
But I resigned it too.
Okay, public engagement plan for the Solar Garden open house.
So this would be the second of the three open houses we were anticipating. We are suggesting that it be held on, now where are we, October 19th?
Yeah.
And working with the team from area and Think Well Shift. And essentially, this is a great way to get the factual information out there, the full information for people to be able to ask their questions. And we'll have the same as the first open house, we'll have pictures. We're looking at having some of the drone footage potentially running in the background so people can see the whole thing. And, you know, we've been really encouraging people to look at the information that's on the website. We've been encouraging people to come and speak to staff. We have had some people have come in, and I think that has proven to be very helpful when people ask the question, because you can answer a question, but then maybe there's another question, and that those follow-up questions don't always go in the same direction. So the open house gives people the opportunity to stand in front of the person that has all of the information and has more answers than the person's questions. So we would be looking for council to approve the draft public engagement plan that's in front of you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Just a question about the, I know that it says the cost of this will be covered by the project and the 50 hours of staff, town staff time. That those are actually covered by the project and not just assume that we actually get that money from the project into town general or something like that.
No,
No?
town staff time, that would be really part of our communications that we do.
Okay.
Our communications are gonna focus more on that and less on, you know, do you have your dog tag? You know, that's really gonna be, yeah. Kind of part of our regular duties.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Conflicts, that's it. It's a requirement.
Yeah, you're right. And I guess we're looking at that. You're quite right. Perspective. Yeah, you're right. That staff time is not considered in that piece of the budget piece there. And that's, I think, because that's something we think about is it is an ongoing project of the town. So it's just a perspective thing, but I see where you're coming from.
Sorry.
Councillor Carver.
Because I have my hand now, fair enough.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two things. One is that I really like the idea of asking the public to submit questions in advance. And because those questions are very real. And as everybody around this table know, I ask questions all the time, like I asked many questions today. It's because we need more, even though a lot of information has already gone out, sometimes the pieces don't all fit together. And so questions need to be asked. So I really like the idea of eliciting questions from the public, and I hope they pour the questions in. I do regret that the plan, the proposed plan, doesn't include at least a small bit of communal discussion, even very simple questions and answers, so that people in the group, in a room at the same time, can hear the same questions being asked and the same answers being given. So I think there's a collective sense of information being shared. And I'm just going to say, for what it's worth, a meme that went around on social media recently that went something like this: the biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it's taken place. So we have prided ourselves on communicating information. A lot of that information has been flowing outwards. Eliciting questions from the public, I think, will be bringing information more in, so it's more dynamic, but I do regret that this plan doesn't include that piece of community all having the same information at the same time, or the same being part of the same conversation at the same time.
You know, it's like an almost a frequently asked question segment that you would have in a face-to-face environment, but then the same questions would be put on the website for the solar garden, where people, if they weren't sure of what they heard, they can go back and find it elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what's been already proposed. I'm thinking more of an actual in-person conversation, where if there's 50 people in the room, 50 people are hearing the same back and forth at the same time, and it's a collective ownership of that information. And that particular type of public engagement hasn't been included in this draft. So I regret that it hasn't, but I like everything else.
This is something that we have found to be very beneficial with a variety of projects. Certainly when I first started with the town, we had an open house. We were the first stages of the living shoreline, sorry, what has now become a living shoreline, but the flood mitigation, that sort of thing. The other thing, it does give, as you said, that ability to ask questions. This is the opportunity for information to come in and out, and many questions can be answered. And the answers, as I said, a follow-up question, you might have a different follow-up question than I do. So you can ask your question, I can ask my question, and we can both go on. And the deputy mayor doesn't have to sit and wait for us to have all of our follow-up questions before he can ask his. We've also found this to be very helpful. And one of the things we've taken away from the last time we had the open house is to really put the information out there that it is a drop-in. We found that to be a barrier. We were the last of the 3 open houses when we did the first round. And in the other 2 towns, they found that it wasn't as clear to people that it was a drop-in. So people were saying, oh, I'm going to go for 3 hours and listen to that. People want to stop on their way home from work or drop one kid off at Taekwondo, go ask some questions before they get the other kid from swimming lessons. So this is something that we have heard, that's feedback we've taken in, that it's important and it makes it more accessible. People know it is a drop-in, you get the information and you go. So that's one of the reasons that we like this, but also this was part of the original plan. Then we're just following through with that at this point. So this is a very specific thing that we're talking about. So that's why this is what it is.
Councillor Feeney.
So Mayor, I can live with the format, but as you all know, like I'm not enamored with it. I would have preferred to have something akin to, like a development agreement, community engagement meeting, similar to the one we had around the Claremont Street development with Mr. Uden last year. I think this may work, but my sense of things in the community wants an opportunity to seek clarity, information in a public meeting from their elected officials. the mayor and councilors, and they want to debate, they want to vent, they want to articulate their concerns, and they're hoping that the councilors will have the opportunity to give back to the community information that put their minds at ease, that decisions are being made in a fair way, cognizant of the entire community's net benefits. They don't want to meet with consultants. They don't want to meet with communications people. They don't want to meet with Think Well, whoever they are. They want to talk to the mayor and the council about their concerns. And we're going to hear more about that on the 28th. And I'm hoping that this will alleviate some of those concerns. But if it doesn't, based on the format, then I think we need to be prepared to have another meeting that eventually gets there. It's okay. We don't all have to agree that this format is right. I'll support it. I'll approve it. I'll approve the motion to support the format. I just think personally, as you know, like this wasn't the format that I would have gone with, but I understand that there are benefits to using this format. Not personally, not how I would have dealt with it.
CEO?
So there's two things to that. When we have the public information meetings, like with the development agreement, the purpose of that is to get questions from the community. We're asking for questions to come into us because the planning staff are looking for what else is required to, when they craft their report. The purpose of this is for members of the public to be able to get information from us. And that is why you'll note in there's even an expectation that we'll have some information, because absolutely, this is the opportunity for people to speak to members of council. And we want to make sure that councilors have that. There are a lot of numbers, there are a lot of dollars. We want to make sure that everybody has that information in their hand, so that when they're stopped, at the last one, we had quite a little conversation going on around the muffins. So we definitely want to have that information. The other issue at play here is that we are coincidentally coming up to a special election period. So I hear what council's saying, but I would ask that maybe we hold off on that sort of thing until we get to the other side of the election, so that it can be purely about the community rather than electioneering, just in case, because we want to make sure we have a good election and a fair election in Long Bay. And we want to keep those two things separate. So that would be my request for that conversation about a town hall type meeting. And certainly we can have a discussion.
What is your request?
That, as you say, you're prepared to talk about the open house as a separate thing. My concern is having a town hall meeting in the middle of an election.
Well, as I understood it, the election, the first nomination meeting is not even to the 25th of October.
Fair enough. Anyway, and that's, I've
Election's
taken us
fine.
off on a tangent.
Yeah.
So.
So, yeah, so at the end of the day, elected officials, can speak to the community about topics of interest.
Absolutely. And that. would be-
24 hours a day, 365 days a year, with no restraint, in my opinion. And I don't believe constraining our ability to communicate to the public any more than we've already been constrained is helpful. At this point, I think we're all of the opinion that the constraints haven't been that helpful. And I would seek more opportunities to speak about the issues that we're dealing with on October 19th in a more formal public way and with a quicker cadence. And we even saw that this evening where we had to defer items for 2 more weeks. We had delegations here tonight to speak to topics. The issues were pushed off. I just think we need, as a council, to have the opportunity to engage more on these topics in a format that is satisfactory to the community. I think that would be helpful.
Deputy Mayor.
So I share your concern, and I did. In my eyes, when I look at this, I've told myself this is staff's approach to how this project goes ahead. And I think just to put it on the record, so far in terms of how this project is communicated, I have been a great difference in terms of how the project is communicated and handled from what staff have recommended. I don't think, with all due respect, I think staff have an approach that works for staff. It is not working for council. And unfortunately for me is that what's ending up happening, staff is taking care of their side of things, and we are having to deal with the political ramifications of how we communicate with these things. And so at some point, now, not speaking to staff, speaking to us as council, we have to come and think about, so what do we need to do as council that will ensure that we as elected representatives are actually functioning in the way our community expects us to. And staff can recommend, they can say, well, and right now I'm prepared to support this plan. Let's support it. It's part of what the project was expected to do. It's a second round of an open house, yes. But maybe we as council need to say, well, you need to do that as the project management team and as the staff, but we as council need this conversation with the community that needs to be set up for us to be able to do that piece. Staff will have done theirs, council can do their piece. So I agree that having a very good, well-moderated back and forth, giving feedback conversation with the community would be very helpful, because in many ways, we've contributed to why we're here at this point in time. And I think that might be able to change or shift some of the narrative around the project. Like I said before, it's a great project that we should be taking pride in, rather than having this very tenuous, I guess, back and forth with a few questions that can be very easily answered. So let's approve this, but let's talk about what do we need as council to feel that we are actually addressing the questions. And maybe the other way to look at it is that after this, maybe the questions will be answered after this and everything will calm down. So maybe let's wait and see after that. If the questions keep percolating, then we can address it to the town hall.
Councillor Now and Councillor Carter.
I agree with the engagement plan, but hearing other comments, I certainly have that same sympathy. Is there any way you get 3 hours allotted for this session, right? Is there any way we could take the first 2 hours, run it that way, then make it known to the public that starting at 7 o'clock, we'll have the public engagement, and everybody can come in there, and if they have questions, even after they've talked to people outside on the other side of it, that they could bring it forth then, and we could sort of combine the two within that time frame.
I don't see being able to pull that off in that time frame, in the time we have to do it. To be able to have an open house in 1 hour is
I'll say
problematic.
2 hours and then one.
Oh, whatever, sorry.
Whatever, doesn't matter.
I think what I've heard from what the deputy mayor has just said is that, if you could correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yeah.
That you're looking for an opportunity for council to be able to engage with the public. So I would say that's a different group of people than would be there. I mean, an open house is a fair amount of space. It takes a fair amount of setup, and for it to be an open house, it does need to cover an amount of time. I think what I'm hearing the deputy mayor say is actually something separate. Is that what you would think? Is that what you're thinking?
Ideally should be separate. So the questions, there would be many technical questions that this particular open house would be able to address. But we also know that many of the questions that are pertinent to residents are not necessarily the technical questions. So why did you land here? And why did you make this consideration of coming through my land rather than this other side? No matter how much information you give that person as to, oh, this is a report that was used and all that kind of stuff, you're actually infringing on my property. Why did you make that decision? We need to at some point face up and say, well, I had to consider all these factors, and this is where I landed, and this is where we landed. and also have them understand, not all this was unanimous that, okay, this is the direction we'll go. There was very good debate around that. And I think that will give the community, I guess, a better feel as to how this process has unfolded, rather than hoping that these technical pieces will address those
Yes.
questions. Yes.
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, a couple of things. One is that I noticed that there is no motion attached to this report, but maybe we can speak to that in a minute. My second thing is that I quite like the deputy mayor's suggestion of separating the two. I mean, it speaks to my concern about having that collective conversation. And I think we could pull it off, and we have somebody in the community, as I've already told council, who's willing to facilitate if that would help. To do that. And one of the things that I think we have to remember about how we've gone off the rails in terms of communication and in public engagement is COVID. The original plan was for far more public engagement during these past 2 years. And we weren't able to do that. And I think that really stymied us, so that we missed that whole piece. And I'm willing to support this draft and even make a motion that we accept the draft public engagement plan as presented.
Okay, hold that thought.
Oh,
Councillor Feeney.
So happy to second the motion, and in speaking to it, I would also say, as well, Councillor Carver, I think the other reality is that we've had a judicial review, and councilors and the mayor were told we can't really speak about this until the judicial review runs its course. And we waited patiently in May, and we waited patiently in June, and we waited patiently in July, and we waited patiently in August, and now we're late September. And at some point, councilors and the mayor need to be able to speak to the community without, in an open way. And we haven't had that opportunity, because that opportunity to speak about these issues has been constrained based on great legal advice that we took advantage of. And I supported, by the way, don't get me wrong, I supported the decision not to speak publicly about this, but it's September, the judicial review has run its course, it's been ended to the town's satisfaction. And at some point, I think these are the kinds of, there's an expectation of the community that their elected officials will have the wherewithal to stand in front of them, take the slings and arrows, take the torches and pitchforks, and respond to their questions. And at the end of that process, they're either left with comfort or they're left with ultra high-end concerns. And we have a responsibility to be able to step up to that challenge and put people's mind at ease. The decisions were made in an honorable, respectful, and fair way. And so when I see this format, I don't think we're going to get that, but I'm hopeful. So I'm willing to support that tonight. I have all the hopes in the world that October 19th will be very successful, and it probably will be. But if it's not, if it doesn't get to where we need it to be, to the deputy mayor's point, then I think we need to be willing to do something else. And maybe whether that happens, but it's time is marching on, and the project timelines we're all well aware of them. So we just don't have the luxury anymore of saying, oh, well, we'll deal with it in 2 weeks. Oh, we'll deal with it next month. Maybe the month after that, we'll talk to people. Like at some point, you have every day matters.
Okay, so Councillor Carver, would you like to make a motion?
I think she did.
She did.
And we voted, and we approved, seconded.
I must have nodded off.
so you asked me to hold that thought for a minute,
Yes,
but I
yeah.
had already said it.
No,
Okay, what is the motion?
except as approved.
The council adopt the draft plan as presented.
Oh my God. Okay, moved and seconded on the question. All in favor? Motion's carried.
Your Worship, I'm hearing something different at this point in the conversation than I heard at the beginning of the conversation. So I think that what's being talked about, an opportunity for council to speak, for the public to ask questions of council. Maybe we can flesh that out a little bit more by email and stuff based on the time of night, but I'm completely hearing something different than I was at the beginning. So I think this
I
is
mean, this has
something
been
we can.
communicated at length by email already before this engagement plan was taken. So we don't need to relitigate it this evening. But it's not like this is a surprise out of the blue. This has been this perspective has been well articulated, in my opinion.
Okay,
So-
I meant no offense, Council Feeney.
Yeah, this is no surprise, right?
okay. Are you
Yep. that was
comfortable with
what
it?
I wanted to say.
All right. Well, we'll see it. We'll see how it goes from here. All right, let's go to, we have our engagement plan covered. Let's go to the flag policy amendment 6.4.
Your worship, council received a draft flag policy on June 30th. At that time, a motion was passed to make a few other amendments and to bring that back to council once confirmation had been received from the Acadia First Nation as to which flag is appropriate to honor the Indigenous people of Mi'kmaq. In your report, you'll find attached to that the response from the Acadia First Nation. And there's also, they kindly included a picture of the Grand Council flag to ensure that we understood which flag they meant. Also attached to the report, you will see the amended flag policy, which includes the amendments from that June 30th meeting. So this is in front of council to potentially approve the flag policy as it's already been discussed at council, and also to invite representatives of the Acadia First Nation to a flag raising when the new flag poles are installed.
Okay, Deputy Mayor,
Let the council adopt the amended flag policy as presented.
seconded by Councillor Carver. You've heard the motion, all in favor? Motion's carried. There's a second one there.
Yeah, I'd like to move the council direct staff to invite representatives of Acadia First Nation to a flag raising with the new flag poles are installed.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Carver again. All in favor? Motion is carried again.
Your worship, if I may.
Yes, please.
I have two questions. One is about, could anybody explain the symbols on the flag?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I know that's out there. I don't recall it.
Yeah, if you can find out, I think it would be worth us all, everybody knowing.
Yeah.
And my second question is about tobacco twists.
Mhm.
Staff further recommend council participation in the preparation of tobacco twists to accompany the invitation of the members of the Acadia First Nation.
Mhm.
Can you tell us more about that?
It is a traditional gift, and it is in fact given when asking rather than having received. Staff actually prepared them when we went to the Acadia First Nation for assistance with the land acknowledgement. The response came back so quickly, we ended up giving them to say thank you, and we also provided little saplings as part of our thank you from our community to theirs. But we would like to send tobacco twists with this invitation. It's a neighborly thing to do, it's a traditional thing to do, and rather than just staff doing it this time, we would like to invite council to take part.
And what would that entail? To take part, what would it involve?
Sitting around this table and a bunch of squares of red cloth, and we can show you there's a way that you do it, and it's done with intentions, and there's direction that you do it, and just kind of, if anyone wants to take part, please let me know. And I'd love to have it done by councilors, because it would go from our council to their council. So if anyone is interested in taking part, I'd be
So
delighted
if you extend an invitation at an appropriate time frame, and we can volunteer as,
Sure, if anyone's interested in taking part, let me know, and then, of course, anything getting council together, it always depends on schedules and who's involved, but if anyone's interested, please send me an email and then we can set it up from there.
but what I'm suggesting is it might work better if you send us an email saying, inviting us to take part with some suggested dates.
Okay.
Would that work?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on that one? We've already done the vote. All right. Do you want to take 5 minutes? It's 9:10. Bathroom break?
We only have 3 items. Oh,
There's another page.
No, another page.
Unfortunately, we have
Okay.
a gas there.
Let's take 5.
Okay.
5 minutes, 10 minutes?
5.
Huh?
5? It's 10 past?
Anyway, speaking of volunteering,
Yeah, huh?
I just wanted to, Deputy Mayor, know that your inability to attend the
Okay, if we're back, welcome back to our people watching. How many do we have watching? Who's running?
We have 15 watching.
Very good.
Very nice.
Okay, financing for the fire station hall. Interest rate update?
Yes, a lot has changed this afternoon. So, just quickly to go over the report in front of you. This is broken down. Phase 1 is the actual fire station. Phase 2 is the fire hall, because that was an addition later on. So this should be the breakdown as expected. The one difference from what was anticipated previously is that with the increase in interest rates, let me just find this on page. Sorry, my PDF and I are not agreeing about page, but page 3, there's a breakdown of the fire society's fundraising activities. So with the current interest rate, what the expectation would be for phase 2, which the fire department said they would take on that to have that fire hall. The expectation would be $72,000. If you look at a breakdown over the last several years of what their fundraising activities have brought in, our manager of finance has concerns that that's beyond their stretch. So she has recommended that we bump that out to a 15-year to pay it back as opposed to the 10. I will note though that again, this is pretty much as expected, and the issue now is that once our FIR is approved, we want to be able to send this off right away. So we are looking for an approval tonight. If not, there are any questions, we will have to look at having a special meeting or something later this week, because we are at the deadline. But as I said, there were some updates today. Our manager of finance has been in touch with the Municipal Finance Corporation, and they're not able to give an actual number until they've gotten their financing, but they had been saying work with a 5.5% work on that for an interest rate assumption. But today we had an email because interest rates have been rising of late. It has been recommended that municipalities and municipal enterprises that are participating in the fall debenture to use an upper interest rate of 6% on the farm. So at the end of the day, I actually quickly crunched some more numbers. So phase 1 with the 0.5% increase in the rate as is presented in this report, we expect to pay approximately $15,000 more between principal and interest. Phase 2, we expect to pay approximately $2,000 more between principal and interest. She doesn't believe that increment in payment will pose a large risk. Fire department will not be able to cover this payment as expected. Again, she's already been cautious and bumped it out to a 15 year.
You're saying like for the fire department, then $62,000 a year instead of 60, is that what you're saying?
No, no, total, like 2,000
Okay,
across
over
the
the whole
whole 15 years. Yeah, so
Okay.
that wouldn't really be a big
No.
issue.
I do
So,
have a question though,
okay, I'll
with
do my
regard to
best.
the fire department portion.
Mhm.
If we have a banner year, can we pay more than what that is and cut that down on the length of time?
Yes, I asked that to Ashley today, and she said that, you know, certainly there's a conversation about penalties and that kind of thing, but usually that stuff works out to be fine, and she doesn't see that being an issue at all. So, obviously like to pay stuff down, so that would be great.
Your worship,
Councillor Kerr.
I have a flip side, a question that's the flip side of that one, which is, it's my impression that for phase 2 of the fire hall fundraising depends largely on few individuals. And what happens if those individuals aren't available or aren't able to carry on the fundraising with the rate and the pace and with the kind of success that they have been having? So, that's my gloomy guess.
The loan's backstopped by the town.
We're the best.
Of course.
So the answer is.
We cross that bridge if we come to it.
If it hasn't burned down.
One other
Sorry.
But has that ever been part of the calculations? Do we know that? And sort of, what happens if?
These calculations are based on the agreement that was made with the fire society. I don't, is it just called the fire department society?
Hopefully fire department society.
Thank you. So that's what's presented in front of you. And that is the basis for this debenture. But yes, if anything were to happen, we'd have to deal with it just like we did today. At what, 3 o'clock, when they changed the interest rate from, so.
So the town assumes the risk as a show of our faith in the fire society to, but if ultimately they just can't.
Yeah.
Someone's gotta pay it,
So
right?
I would
Deputy Mayor?
I would assume they would, hopefully, would have a succession plan in terms of all those different kinds of activities, right?
Yeah, we're also planning on boosting our fundraising activities over the next couple of years. I know, right now, bingo's been a big part of our fundraising. So we are in the hopes of boosting that, so that we can say, okay, let's build up a little reserve. Bingo brings in that 60,000, okay, fine. But in case it doesn't, we're gonna try building up some of that by having different fundraisers. We have a movie night coming up on Friday night. It's by donation, and we're gonna also have concessions just like that. Might not make a whole lot of money onto it. We don't know it's the first try, so we don't have any idea. But
Did you pay to rent the film?
we paid to rent the equipment.
Okay.
We had to rent because it's a big screen that goes
Sure,
inside.
yeah.
We had to rent that and the projector and all that stuff. Yes, I went to Truro today to pick it up. So
Maybe we should have our council meeting at the fire hall on movie night.
yeah, movie night there. That's it.
Yeah. Okay, anything else?
Mayor, just a point of clarification on the report. I think the capital reserve as of March 2023, as per the budget, I don't think that's accurate, is it? That 924?
This is the information I have from Ashley.
Isn't the official budget, approved budget, have a capital reserve at the end of 2023 of 1.3, almost 1.4 million dollars in the capital reserve?
I don't have that information in front of me. All I can say is that this was presented to us by the finance manager of finance. I can certainly see if I can find out.
But yeah, I think we have the final budget though, don't we? Like I think that
I believe
number's
we do.
page 16 or 15. I think it's.
I just don't recall it off the top of my head.
Anyway, we can follow up from
Can you
from
check on
Ashley,
it?
but
Yeah.
An email tomorrow maybe
Yeah.
to clarify?
I thought the budget document was pretty clear that the capital budget was about 400, almost about $400,000 higher than, almost $500,000 higher than that, so.
Yes, I can follow up with that with an email. Actually, better than that, I'll ask Ashley to do it herself so that, yeah.
Okay. One other question I have is regarding you have the recommendation here, the council approved transfers from reserves. It's got from the fire equipment reserve for $405,000 for phase 1. If I read correctly up top here, the fire reserve is only 100 and some thousand. Why would that phase 1 reserve money come out of the fire equipment reserve?
Where are you seeing that, please?
Down on the
where
recommendations?
It's recommended.
Okay.
It's highlighted.
It's for the recommendations that are being made. For phase 1.
My brain's just about maxed out. I apologize. I have to go back.
Towards the end where the recommended
Ashley,
motions are.
Yellow
Yeah,
part.
I see. Honestly, I'm going back and forth and I'm not seeing it. At this point, I think,
This is recommendations for motions, so.
yes, I see what you're saying. I'm just like to go back and forth.
I mean, we should approve the borrowing.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, I'm not sure why
I think
for phase 1, which is the town part of the project, why that would come out of fire equipment reserve, even if there wasn't enough money there.
Well, there's definitely not 400, right?
And I'm
Well-
sorry, that's something I would have to get the manager of finance to break down for you. I did ask a lot of questions to prepare for this, but I did not see that one.
Where,
So
where,
I'm sorry.
where is that, Richard? Where do you see that?
The 405,
And the
first
recommendation.
bullet, then we recommend negotiations.
In
And
the
then
yellow,
right towards
in the
bottom.
yellow.
So yeah, that's if you want, as I said, we're up against the deadline and I'm sorry, it's 9:30 and my brain is cheese. But I can definitely follow up and get some answers from the manager of finance in the morning.
Okay.
So, as I said, we're at the deadline for this. If council, I don't know, did you want to look at setting up a special meeting? We could tack this, I mean, this will
Well,
certainly qualify
well,
as a,
If we had approved the borrowing tonight, is that rather than just recommending?
Approve the borrowing and send us the
Not approve the
updated
reserves
numbers electronically.
We could approve the borrowing and just leave the others for later.
Yeah, we wouldn't have to have the meeting.
yeah, and then we can just add it to the meeting on the 28th then.
And I make the motion that council pass the attached pre-approved motion in the sum of $12,355,146.
Seconder, Councillor now seconds.
So that's just the borrowing amount, right?
Yeah, and that borrowing is to re-up the financing that's going on for the fire hall and the fire station.
Overall, yes.
Yeah,
So does the other section need to have a motion to refer it to either to tack it on to the special meeting on Friday or to the end of September meeting? Does it require a motion?
I was just gonna bring it back. I'll do it one way or the other because it's not something we were able to address, so I'll just put it on there one way or the other. So that's fine.
we'll vote, we'll make the motion with the understanding that staff will provide the updates.
But
Yeah, I'm not pretty sure that 405,000 is
not-
fire trucks.
Well, I'm just saying it says fire equipment reserves. I'm just wondering why that was come out of,
That can't be right.
no.
There's not that
And
much.
why would it come out of fire equipment reserve anyway for phase one, which is the town part of the project?
That's not financing the rescue truck, is it?
That was coming out
but
of-
we don't need to discuss it tonight. We
No.
just have to
No.
dispose of it somehow.
Well, I think Councillor Wilson's just willing to approve the final motion.
Yep.
The final.
Yeah, we've done that.
The borrowing.
Okay.
Okay,
Did we vote?
all in favor? Motion's carried. And you're gonna provide it.
Yeah, I've already added. it to the
Okay,
next agenda.
thank you.
Yep.
All right. Let's go back over to the other one.
Living shoreline.
Yes,
Mhm.
living shoreline protective barrier.
So again, council has had the opportunity to read the report. Basically, what we're looking at is something between the walkway and the living shorelines, both to protect the plantings, because make sure this works, and also just as a safety thing, rather than just to delineate it a bit.
Councillor Kerr.
Well, I think it would be attractive and helpful, well, attractive, but I'm curious, do we know that people go down that embankment onto the shoreline there? I mean, have they done that in the past, or is it just because it's a new configuration that we anticipate that people might want to go down the embankment onto this lovely new little area down there?
Both. We've had a few opportunities to be over there. We've had visits from a number of different people from the federal government and this sort of thing. And if the gates, if the little hole is open in the fence, we certainly have a lot of curiosity. And once those little plants are squished, then yeah, they're squished. So we want to make sure to delineate this, and certainly people could still choose to hop over the rope. I mean, we're not suggesting like a cement wall or anything like that, but it's just sort of to encourage mindfulness and also to do our due diligence. So mindfulness of the plantings and the fact that there's water and yeah.
But I guess I'm not sure I got my question answered, which is, do people actually, have they been going over the edge there and walking on that new, on this?
No, because they
It's stopping now.
6-foot fence,
There's
8-foot
fence,
fence.
but prior to the fence being there and prior to the work being done, did people go down the embankment
No, that was a big bag.
It looks like a rock.
It's because,
It's not a
the
big
whole
bag.
configuration has changed. Thank you very much. I just haven't seen it close up, so,
Oh,
thank you.
I did have an email from a citizen who wondered how long the fence was going to be there.
Yeah, okay.
Because they were trying to take pictures of the shoreline and weren't able to do so with the fence in place.
Look, I'm not excited about this one, Mayor. Just from a prioritization perspective. It's just, is this $15,000 that we really need to spend? There's any number of items. I mean, we've been trying for 4 years to get the telephone poles replaced. There's a list, not the, you know, the street lamps replaced for me along that corridor. I mean, I don't really, I mean, they're fine. We've never had a rope or a barrier along that. I don't think there's a safety issue. It's not funded. We did, you know, I think we're intending to draw down from the budget allocation, but again, remember, the budget allocation was 100% borrowing. And we just heard a story about where the interest rates are.
Mm.
You know, so this is not just the $15,000, it's also the $1,000 a year of interest for now and for the next 30 years to pay for it. And just doesn't strike, we just had the budget 2-3 meetings ago. And this didn't make the list. So, I mean, maybe it's a worthy project, put it on next year's list and we'll evaluate it against all the other things we have and we'll debate it a year from now and see if it makes the grade.
Councillor Now.
I have to agree with Councillor Feeney on that. Maybe a couple of signs along there on posts, just telling people to stay off of that area. I think it'll probably work as well as that rope is, because if they want to disobey the signs, they're gonna climb over that rope, because that rope's not that high. They can't climb over it or go under it. So I don't think that's really the be all and end all for protecting that area. I think a couple of signs might serve our purpose as well. At least try it, and like if we see that it is a problem, next year we put it in our budget for the do it.
Okay.
But this is money we don't have.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm with the majority.
So we will,
I just, defer it to next year's budget deliberations, Mayor.
okay.
Suggest.
Okay,
Sorry, I was just gonna say, if the desire is to defer it to next year's budget deliberations, it would be helpful to have a motion to put that in.
okay.
So just a comment, I wouldn't even want us to define it just in terms of priorities.
Yeah.
Why do you need a fence there? I don't think we need one.
So would you propose a motion that we defer the item till the next budget year?
No, just.
I'm okay just moving along.
Just say no?
Just decline it,
Doesn't strike me as a priority.
We need to spend our money.
decline it and say,
Okay,
see
all
what
right.
happens.
One of the pictures there is the barrier at Ketty's Landing. Reminds me that Mark Lowe is going to be on Dragon's Den
Yes.
tomorrow night to talk about his lobster wagon venture. He took it to Dragon's Den and got some money out of it.
Oh, did it get some money?
Anyway, tomorrow night.
Before we leave this topic, you knocked the idea right out of my brain there. Who initiated the idea of the fence there? And it was the idea of protecting the planting. Did it come from Coastal Action, or was it?
I believe so, but I don't know that it's. I don't know that it's fair to say that it initiated from them. It may have come from one of the ongoing project meetings, because there are project meetings and there are many different stakeholder groups and individuals involved with this project. So I don't know whether it came from one of those meetings particularly, or if it was straight up suggested by Coastal Action. But
Yeah,
it is coming from Coastal Action, but I couldn't say it's a recommendation to protect that section of the
Coastal Action believes a barrier along the edge is necessary for public safety and to prevent damage to the living shoreline, plantings, etc.
Yeah, well, it certainly would be a shame if the project were compromised by careless public behavior.
Just leave the metal
Yeah.
fence. for 6 months every year.
Ooh,
Like,
Four-road fence, it came from, it was, belonged to the contractors who did the job, and they're gonna come take it back.
so the only other option is, as Councillor now has suggested, it possibly. a
Signage, your worship, we're done with this.
We've already had the motion.
Run.
Yeah.
Oh, we have no
Okay.
motion yet.
Maybe we could get some like plastic
There's
shark
no-
fins and put
there's been
them
no
out in
motion
the
yet.
water to keep people from going in. Okay, thank you for that discussion. Let's go to the staff report on request for grants, 6-7.
So again, you have the report in front of you. It details the 2 requests for grants that have come in. Have a breakdown of the money that was remaining in the allocation for grants to organizations. And one is a request for $250 from Home Bay Kids T-Ball, one for $750 for the Canadian Tire Para Cup at the LCLC. And staff are looking for a motion from council. Did you want to approve those grants or no?
Worship.
Yes, please.
I would like to know if the amount of 750 was the actual specific request from the Paracup, the LCLC people. And can we find out what other municipal units have contributed? It just 750 seems high. So I'm interested to know both those things. What are other units contributing, and
They
was
have-
750 their specific request? And I would just intuitively think that $500 would be more of the ballpark that I would think of, but I'm curious, sorry, what the other units are putting in.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Just a similar question with the T-ball request was, did they request 250 in particular, or is this an amount that staff have determined?
We would have to get that, I'm not finding it that quickly, so we'd have to get that information from the CAO. So council might choose to make a motion to defer this to the end of September.
I will say with regard to the T-ball request, I don't know if that was specific enough they requested. But I know that they've had T-ball back in the park over the last couple of years, and they requested to have the ballpark free of charge, but that was denied. And they ended up paying rental, and that the coach who took this on and organized this paid it out of his own pocket.
Whoa.
So I think was a bad mistake in the first place. I mean, that's what the park is for, and we have to turn down kids programs for in that park, then I think we're making a big mistake.
Councilor Feeney?
sorry, Mayor, you may recall that item did come up through social media. There was some commentary about that, and I think
Yeah.
that this is a worthwhile pursuit. With regard to the para hockey, I mean, I believe this is an annual request that we've had over the last few years.
It canceled last year, didn't it?
I think it might have, but Councillor Carver's point, we did authorize or appropriate $500 last year. So that was, I think we did have the same discussion a year ago and did 500 to Councillor Carver's point. So I'm probably more inclined to go that road again, the 250 for the T-ball and the 500 for the
Hockey, para hockey,
hockey tournament. And we'll see if there are any more requests that come the rest of the year.
yeah. Deputy Mayor?
So my thoughts were, because already 1,000 is allocated, then it'd be 500 each, if these are not specific requests for a particular amount of money. Because we've already impacted this T-ball enthusiasts negatively by charging them, which is a conversation that we need to have at an appropriate time. So it might be a good show. We support you. We want you to grow the program by giving them some-
Giving them the other
When you-
250.
yeah, when you
Yeah.
get an individual wanting to donate their time, I mean, and get a program like that going, because we don't have a rec program anymore. I think it's a great incentive for the town.
You want to make that a motion, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I can. I'd like to move the council approve grants to organization in the following amounts from the 2022-2023 budget. Mahone Bay Kids T-ball, $500, and Canadian Tire Para hiccup, but they also see certain problems.
Seconded by Counselor Now. On the question. All in favor? Motion's carried. I think that's a good one. Okay. So, appointment to community logo steering team, item 7.1. This was in particular for members of council. There are two of them, are there not?
That's correct, and one of them would be named as the co-chair. The co-chair, once the full committee is formed, then a co-chair will also be nominated from the group of volunteers on the committee, but we're looking for two appointments to the steering team sorry, it's a committee, steering team. We're looking for two council appointments to the steering team this evening, and one of whom would be the co-chair.
He looks with anticipation at the freshly washed faces of people just itching to get on this one. Do I have any volunteers?
Well, I had suggested two names in private conversation. I don't know if the two names that I mentioned would care to respond to my suggestion.
Mayor, why don't we defer item 7.1 until the meeting on the 28th, and we can have some private conversations around the table to make sure that we do have volunteers / victims.
Little bit of our
Appointed by next meeting.
Voluntold.
Voluntold.
Hearing
Fair enough.
no
Fair enough.
volunteers coming forward,
Wow.
entertain a motion to defer the item till the next meeting. Thank you. Do you have a seconder? All in favor? Deferred to the end of the month.
So, Your worship, lest the public get the wrong impression, I think that people need to recognize, I hope that people recognize that council agendas are pretty full with meetings and
That's
committees
right, they are.
already. And yeah, that's all I'll say
All right.
about that.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Wilson, Public Transportation.
Yes, Your Worship. I had a note from Councillor Carver wondering about the phraseology in this, that council accepting the recommendation of the Internal Transportation Committee. Which I don't think even really exists. So with everyone's agreement, I will slightly reword this to say, I move that council support the request from Greg Kerwin and Gary Ramey to conduct privately funded business plan for the development of a public transit system in Winnipeg County.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Do we know what the other municipalities in Lunenburg County have done?
Obvious notion.
Okay,
I know Modal has supported it. So I don't know that anybody else.
Yeah, this is not a financial support, right?
No,
no, and they're gonna come back with recommendations. We're not committed
No.
on, maybe should be, but we're not committed on that, okay? You've heard the motion, moved and seconded on the question. All in favor? Motion is carried. Let's go to Councillor Carver, the ad hoc committee to review the town's committee policy committee policy.
yes, so the situation, as I laid out, is that the Policy and Strategy Committee is scheduled to review the town council and town committee's policy on September 25th. And then it goes on to describe the tight time frame that exists to get any changes that might be recommended in place before the next round of council appointments. Public members of the committee might be appointed in November. So I am making a motion that council approve the immediate creation of an ad hoc committee composed of 1 staff and 2 members of council for the purpose of preparing a draft revision of the process for selecting citizen members of council committees. And that the draft revision be submitted for consideration of the Policy and Strategy Committee at its meeting on September 26th, 2022. That's not very far away. Only 2
No,
weeks.
it's not.
No. But otherwise, that's my motion.
Okay. You've heard the motion. Do we have a second? Deputy Mayor seconds?
Can I speak a little bit more to?
On the question, please, go
Yeah,
ahead.
And the rationale for doing that in advance is to bring some content to the Policy and Strategy Committee, which is a 2-hour meeting in theory. And the committee, these policies are complicated because they're just complicated. And the whole process of selecting citizen members has been under discussion ever since I've been on council, since 2012.
Make that 2008 when I got on council.
Yeah, so
Being
it's
discussed,
been
yeah.
discussed and revisited and revised, and we, in my view, still don't have it right. I think the scoring system is awkward. I think the discussion in the public forum is awkward. And there must be a better way somehow. At any rate, I thought that a small committee of 1 staff and 2 members of council could put their heads together and bring some a recommendation or suggestions to the meeting on the 26th, just to save time, because it's going to be a lot of material to get through.
Good point. So we have a motion, we have a seconder. Deputy Mayor, do you want to comment?
Yeah, and this is my naivety around the, I guess, recruitment, nomination process and timelines and things like that. I'm asking myself, is that pressure we're creating on ourselves? Or is it actual pressure that we have to fulfill that particular mandate at a specific time? If you know what I mean. Do we necessarily, is it a must that we will be breaking something if we did not do nominations or call out within a specific time frame?
If I may, yes, because sort of. The members that are currently appointed to committees were appointed for a 2-year term, specifically ending in December of 2022. So we would need to, for committees to be functioning in January of 2023, we would need to have those appointments made. That said, in 2020, when this council was appointed, committee appointments weren't actually finished until into the start of the new year. So council could always decide to hold off and take a little longer and just not have committee meetings in January or something like that. So that's the appointments end the end of December this year.
Which I guess for me speaks to the point of, yes, there's some pressure, but it's not, for me, it doesn't have to be.
Doesn't in September.
And that September meeting, if we need to push it forward, let's do that and do a good job on it rather than rush to finish off something. And then we'll be here 8 years down the road.
So that deferral would require us to amend the agenda for the policy meeting, which is I think fair as well.
But amend it, excuse me.
No, please go ahead.
Amend the agenda how? I mean, the agenda for September 26th is to discuss the committee policy and the council policy. So
No, fair point. We would just push those 2 items to October to provide an opportunity for the ad hoc committee to have a
I
more
see.
thoughtful conversation in a less time constrained way. So we would just so we would just simply kick the can down the road for a month and then find some other interesting topic to talk about next Monday evening.
Well, I think that the council policy is gonna take up the whole 2 hours.
Well, fair enough.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, by policy, the agenda for the Policy and Strategy Committee is set at a meeting of council. So, I mean, we could certainly say it's just going to be, you know, we get to the Policy and Strategy Committee meeting on September 25th. We could say we're removing the committee policy from tonight's discussion, but and that was speaking, I think. But yeah, honestly, I think it would probably be better to have a motion of council because we've said the agenda will be set by motion of council and that agenda has been set. So what we're putting out in the public should line up with what we expect.
Well,
Yeah.
given the discussion, and an excellent suggestion for the deputy mayor, I withdraw my motion.
Okay, all right,
And then we'll move that council revise the agenda for the September 26th meeting to defer the discussion of the committee policy to the October policy and strategy committee. Pardon?
No replacement?
Because we already have a council
It's
policy,
the
so
council
she's
policy.
saying
It's
just
gonna
council
take the whole
policy and not the
thing.
committee
It's
policy.
gonna take 2 hours at least.
okay, so that's your new motion.
Yes,
Do we have a seconder? Deputy Mayor seconds on the question,
Question?
okay?
So if you remove your motion for the ad hoc committee, but my understanding is that the deputy mayor was suggesting that that be deferred so that the ad hoc committee had more time. I just want to make sure we don't lose a piece in the middle or that I get caught up on what we're thinking is all.
I'm glad that your brain is still. I
So
lost it on that.
I need that for the next meeting, right? October 20th.
Can we roll that all back now?
It would work. I mean, it could go in, you know, this motion's on the table, you know, vote on this motion and then make your previous motion. Yeah,
Let's change that.
Yeah.
September.
because then I'd also be looking for a motion to say who is going to be on that ad hoc committee.
Yeah.
So can we vote on this one first and then?
I'd suggest because she's withdrawn the motion about the ad hoc committee. So the motion on the table right now is to revise the agenda for the September 26th meeting of the Policy and Strategy Committee to defer the discussion of the committee policy.
You were the seconder?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? Motion is carried.
Okay, so, I will
Now-
do this again. I move the council approve the immediate creation of an ad hoc committee composed of 1 staff and 2 members of council for the purpose of preparing a draft revision of the process for selecting citizen members of council committees, and that the draft revision be submitted for consideration of the Policy and Strategy Committee at its meeting in October.
Okay. Second? All in favor? Motion's carried.
So that
Falls on
leaves-
Halloween.
Mayor, you join Councilor Carver's ad hoc committee. Does that eliminate you from the the logo committee?
I hope so. Do we have any volunteers for the ad hoc committee? Of which we need 2.
I'm happy to join Councilor Carver on the ad hoc committee if she'll have me.
Well, I haven't volunteered yet, but I'll
But you will.
volunteer.
You will. So we have 2 volunteers.
You just need a
Plus,
staff
we
member.
just,
All we need is a staff person, but that would be up to the
Yeah,
CAO
but
to
maybe
assign
Kelly
someone.
wants to volunteer and be considered as one of the 2. And no, he doesn't want. Okay. Anyone else? Going, gone. Congratulations, Councilor Feeney and Councilor Carver. Okay. All right. Anything else on that? Councilor Wilson, noise regulations and bylaws.
Yes, your worship. Well, I'm of 2 minds about this motion ever since I said I was going to do it. That we are faced with a a bunch of problems that all seem to come back to noise. And, you'd like to think there's a little bit of common sense in the world, but apparently it's not all that common. So it seems like we're going to have to legislate as best we can in this area. I did a little bit of research, by which I'm going to ask Mr. Google about bylaws in this area. And there were actually some very interesting ones from very big centers like Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver, places like that, where they were talking about decibel levels at property levels. So stuff that's actually easy to measure and would hold up, rather than, I don't like it because so-and-so school was tires when they went around the corner and blah, blah, blah. The stuff we typically get. So, and I understand we're looking at the Lunenburg situation as well, but I think casting a wider net might be appropriate in this area to see what's really out there in terms of the art of the possible. So with that in mind, I'm going to move this motion and see where it lands. That council directs staff to review the current best practices in the field of bylaws referencing noise with a view to developing a recommendation to council on how or if to proceed with the matter of noise regulations via bylaw.
Seconded, Councillor Carver. On the question, anyone? I would note that I was talking to a member of the Police Advisory Board in Stellarton who commented that in Pictou County, they have handheld decibel meters that they buy at Amazon. And that's what they're using to stand on the street and pick off these noisy vehicles.
You can put them on your phone.
Really? Because we were always told it was a very expensive, very complicated, special and everything. Yeah.
Well, we were always told a lot of things that. They know the best answer.
Okay. On the question,
Uh-oh.
all in favor? Motion's carried. All right, that ends our agenda.
No, there's another side.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Our CMP's quarterly update. And the accessibility quarterly update for April to June quarter. Any questions or comments?
Mayor, I'd move that we accept the RCMP update for Q2.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Now, all in favor? Motion's carried. What about the accessibility quarterly update? Anyone?
Except for.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Carver. All in favor? The motion is carried. There is no new business. There is no closed session. Okay, we will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting and then we will go to the folks at home and here in the council chamber for their comments.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Now. All in favor? The motion is adjourned. The folks that are at home watching us on YouTube, if you have any, do you have any questions at this point? If you have any questions, please enter, send them in. And while we're waiting for that, we'll hear from you.
So my name is Bruce Barton. Been one of the guys that's threatening expropriation of my land. I've been working on this petition. One of the questions that has come up a lot is when will the cost of site and route alternatives be publicly available? So that includes those that have been dismissed. And where is the cost in use to dismiss various alternatives? Because there are clearly lots of things that don't seem to have been considered, whether that's a some backyard or for something else or a longstanding belief. I've spoken with some ex-counselors, particularly about the site behind the soccer field. Because that seems to make the most sense as an alternative site in the Solar Garden. On costing budget, we save at least $1 million in the wires. There would be zero power bleed because they're very short lines. There would be at least trees cut down of any alternative. And we wonder why that wasn't considered. In speaking with former councillor, he said you'd have better luck taking out the Indian burial ground than using that for this kind of thing. Now, I'm not sure if that is a feeling that's shared by the rest of the people on council. But if it is, I don't think that's good enough.
I didn't quite hear what Mr. Barden said. You'd have better luck doing.
I don't, it's the words that were used, and I don't mean it to be, if it can be interpreted offensively, that's not what it's meant for. It's sort of purpose of communication. You have better luck digging up an Indian burial ground than using the land behind the soccer field for a project. And I think that if that's the mentality of council, that's not good enough, because to me, that was that, and also in conjunction with the Nova Scotia Power clear cut, is an option that really should have been considered. So people would like to see what numbers, what things were used to justify not going down that route.
Okay.
Another thing that's come up, I have had conversations with people on the asset management committee. So one of the reasons for going directly through private citizens' lands that has been cited is the environmental impact of going back to the tracks on Marsh. Speaking with people in the asset management committee, there were discussions of infilling the marsh for some sort of a town project. So that really reduces the validity in my books of the environmental impact business use. My neighbor Norman Mossman has received an offer from the town to buy his land, that marsh portion, for $80,000. So those two things together, it seems, I don't know, it seems like that reduces the strength of that. People would like to see public discussion. I believe that's a kid at home, so watch a little bit on YouTube. I think you guys talked about that.
19th of October.
Yeah, so is there a public discussion? Like getting to talk to the councilors, so let's talk about that. Will, in that thing on October 19th, will townspeople be presented with options of where to go from here? Or is it just justifying your position? Is it working with the town, or is it just defending? That's basically it.
Okay. Thank you.
So the question in that is, the main question is, when will we be provided with cost and various routes, various sites, what you use to make the decisions?
CAO, you want to comment on when?
I can't comment on when, without, I think that would have to come to the next meeting. As you know, we received the petition too late to be added on this agenda, so it's already added to the agenda for the end of the month. I think the CAO would have to speak at that time. I don't know.
I've spoken with various reporters, and some of them spoke with the CAO. And one of the things that I said is, please ask them the cost of the current transmission lines.
I'm sorry, you've spoken with who?
Various reporters, and one of them has said, was the has spoken with them, asking about the transmission line, what is the cost? So on the side of what is the expected cost? So this is the kind of stuff that people want to know. Like, why are you doing it the way that you're doing? The numbers that we have seen on some cost and routes are just particular. We have been the only ones to see them. And they also factor in for 3 acres of land inside town, a $20,000 value. The average price for raw land in the last year that has sold in Mahone Bay is $210,000 per acre. So you're saying you're cutting through our land to save, it's about $400,000 when you include the 25% contingency fee. But that's pricing our land at $20,000 for 3 acres. Well, if you use public market value, it's $600,000.
I'm not sure how the firm that does the evaluations, who I am given to understand, does this all across the province, not just in the town of Mahone Bay. But
So
it's
it's
their number.
$5,000 per acre is what Turner Creek gave us. And I don't really want to talk about price. That's not much.
No.
So.
Councillor Feeney.
So Mayor, I think that's a fair point, Bruce, about, so there'll be an ongoing issue around valuation that I think is a separate and distinct conversation from disclosure of information that can be in the public domain and would illustrate what the thought process was around decision making. So, I believe that it'd be my expectation that that kind of information is a reasonable request, and it will be disclosed if it's not disclosed to the community satisfaction yet. That it should be. I mean, I think the math is pretty well understood. I think the rationale, both from an environmental protection perspective and a cost perspective and a technical perspective, has been well vetted.
I disagree.
It may-
Look at these things, I totally disagree.
Well,
Totally
let me rephrase that.
Not debating.
The information that would be reasonably disclosed that any reasonable person in the community would expect to receive, I think should be provided, and I have every expectation that it will be provided if it hasn't been provided yet. So it may not have been communicated well, but I think everyone's expectation that it will eventually be provided to everyone's satisfaction. I think that's reasonable.
Councillor Carter and then Deputy Mayor.
I'd just like some clarification around the guidelines for this
Yeah,
question
that's supposed to be
period.
Debate.
It's supposed to be 10 minutes after the end of council.
10 minutes, and it's an opportunity for members of the public to ask us questions, or us to ask.
About something that's happened during the meeting.
Something that's happened during the meeting. Okay, thank you. May I ask Mr. Barden a question about his comments?
Yes?
So, Mr. Barden, when you refer to the land behind the soccer field, are you referring to what's commonly called that back section of the old school lands?
Sir, it's currently residential.
It's currently zoned residential. Thank you.
So the feeling is that it is town council feels that it's easier to expropriate land than what it is to rezone their own land. And that is another thing that just as.
Nothing's easy, Mr. Barden.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor.
So I guess a list of questions around information that you would like the public to have. I was sort of wondering from my end in terms of what's being captured, because we're making a commitment that residents will receive that information. Are we actually clear what that information is that's being requested? Because it might be helpful rather than have this conversation afresh. If you have that list.
So the list is costing at least three different alternatives. One is the financial analysis, the technical analysis that you use to dismiss the land behind the soccer field. Then the technical analysis and financial analysis of cutting through the property versus going back to the tracks. So going down.
I think that,
Sure.
yeah,
That, I just read a memo today, with all the numbers for that piece in it, which is in the public domain. Unfortunately, it's in my dead computer as well. So.
It doesn't actually, because I have not seen anything on the land behind itself.
Oh, no, there's nothing financial about that. And behind the soccer field, there's a visceral reaction to how much trouble the council of 2001 got in,
So this
or
is,
suggesting houses be built there.
so I would say that this is dramatically different. So that was at a time that 14 acres, including the soccer field, was to be sold to a developer for $90,000.
That's right.
Right.
Yep,
This is.
that was what it was valued at.
Yeah. So this is using, this would use, if you move the whole 5 acre footprint of the solar garden to the, to any portion of it, not the soccer field, obviously. I have a problem with creating new scars on green bed. So if you put it next to the scar, that is the Nova Scotia Power haircut, ideally use as much of that as possible. But if you put it there, it would be about a third of the land. It would save the town at least $1 million in line costs and produce a more efficient plant because you need zero power.
Yes, I apologize, Mr. Barton. It's late in the day. I got the technical and financial analysis of the land behind the soccer field and the technical and financial analysis. I'm sorry, what was your second?
So there's your current route.
Okay, route. Thank you.
Mm,
I apologize.
And then the alternative going back to the tracks.
Down the tracks.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And I'm assuming any reasonable person would also want public disclosure of the Main Street corridor costing as well. Fair enough. I mean, those questions are completely fair. And that was the community's expectations that they'll be readily available. I think that's what we'll see on the 19th, and to the degree that we can issue any of that information and clarity before the 19th, like, let's please do that.
certainly that's the vehicle that it would all be.
So I
careful
do also
discussion.
think that of the analysis of going across land versus going back to the tracks, you should consider that some of my neighbors are willing to sell their portion of land at the tracks for $1, and the valuation for the arable land would be taken going across land or taking an easement on, however you want to describe it,
Mm.
but really taking its use away has a very different valuation. It would be closer to 200,000 per acre than 5,000 per acre. So the numbers presented to us using $20,000, because that was the cost at the time, as the value of the land, and having a $400,000 difference between going to the tracks versus going through our land. If you apply a real valuation to any of it, you're expropriating land to save $100,000, or even you're going to lose money by expropriating land, because that argument will happen in court afterwards. That's the only remedy to expropriation. The rules are that the courts deem that you have done it in the best interest of everybody, and it's the right thing, and then our only action is on valuation. So budget wise, if you're using $20,000 to value the budget, that budget decision is not a real decision, so that's not a real budget.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Barton?
Thank you, that was helpful.
All right. So we'll be discussing with CAO certainly about these, the numbers that Mr. Barton is referring to. And certainly, if not before then, at the 19th of October, if the numbers are there, they'll be made public.
So we're going to continue to vote the petition. I'm not around at the end of this month. I will discuss.
No?
So we'll discuss them.
Okay,
Well, we may have information for you before then, because I'm pretty sure most of it is already in the public domain.
I think you're right, but the CAO is the only one that would have that information for sure.
Well, I don't mean, I mean, it's just a link to the Solar Garden website. I think it's all there. in one
So
location.
there's one thing that I've recommended that you guys do a bit better, is not provide links to websites. Simply ask for the information. So
Oh, yeah.
take the effort to put together an email with documents attached to it. So here's what there's been a few times where council has said, well, let's refer them to the website. And
Well, I'm gonna refer myself to the website.
Okay, anything on the
Thanks
online
for hanging
people?
in, that was a long way.
All right. Yes, 10:15.
Thanks, Chris.
We are adjourned.
Is anybody still online with questions?
There's no questions.
No. Thank you, people at home who joined us on YouTube. How many do we have left now?